Chapter 217. You are the prince of the Empire of the Sun? Tian was calm, but Gao Han was not so calm. Hearing Gong Sheng's identity, his face immediately revealed a look of fear. What? Are you afraid? Gong Sheng chuckled and became even more arrogant. With a complacent face, he said to Tian, "This young master is in a good mood today. I'll give you a chance. Hand over the Violet Sun Pill Cauldron and the Wild World Defying Blade Technique, and then give the girl beside you to this young master to play with for 2 days. Then you kowtow to this young master 3 times, and this matter will be over. How about it?" After Gong Sheng finished speaking, he crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking high and mighty. He did not look at Tian's reaction at all. Tian laughed. He did not want to laugh, but he could not hold it in. He really did not know where Gong Sheng, a fool who was born in his mother's womb, could get such confidence. If it weren't for his high-spirited appearance, Tian would have thought that he was a monkey that had escaped from a circus. Jean de Bayo also could not help but laugh. He had seen too many people who thought they were awesome in front of Tian, but unfortunately, the end result was very miserable. Lan Binji was dead, Shang Mingyu was dead, and even the Fengqin Empire's Feng Wuk had fled in fear. Without a doubt, this idiot in front of him would not live past today. "Young Master Sheng, it's a pity that I am in a bad mood today," Tian said, his face darkening. He could not be bothered to talk nonsense with Gong Sheng, and shouted, "Gao Han, kill them! Kill, kill!" Gao Han was stunned, and looked at Tian in astonishment, wondering if he had heard wrongly. Gong Sheng was the prince of the Sun Empire, not a piglet. How could he be killed so easily? In Gao Han's eyes, Gong Sheng was a prince, but in Tian's eyes, this prince was not even comparable to a piglet. Tian stared at Gao Han and said in a deep voice, "Gao Han, didn't you hear what I said?" Gao Han felt the suffocating pressure that almost condensed into a solid form from the gaze, and he instantly felt his mind tremble. In the next moment, he hardened his heart and ordered, "Everyone, listen up, kill them." Yes, the other guards finally reacted and immediately shouted in unison. In fact, these guards were extremely displeased with the way Gong Sheng and the other young masters did things. Now that they had the opportunity to make a move, how could they hesitate? In any case, if anything were to happen, Tian would take care of it. They were just following orders. "Young Master Sheng." The aura of the 20 or so guards was very strong. The guy who lost his ear was so scared that he cried. "Brad, do you know who I am? I am the prince of the Sun Chu Empire." Gong Sheng roared out furiously. The change in the situation was completely out of his expectations. However, before he could even finish speaking, Gao Han's frost snake spear had already pierced over. Gao Han's strength was at the 9th level of the Wanxiang realm, the same as Gong Sheng. Moreover, his frost snake spear's origin spirit was of the rare ice attribute. Every time the spear pierced out, cold air would appear in the air, and it could actually form sparkling and translucent ice flowers. Tian was also slightly surprised. He didn't expect that Gao Han's strength was not that great. Among martial artists of the same level, he was definitely a top-notch existence. The people around Gong Sheng screamed nonstop. How could these young masters who usually ate, drank, and played around be a match for Tianluo City's guards? However, Gong Sheng and Gao Han were actually fighting very fiercely. Frost Snake's tongue. Gao Han's frost snake spear pierced out, and an ice flower appeared, instantly turning into an extremely cold ice blade, attacking Gong Sheng. Gong Sheng didn't panic. He raised his arm, and a sharp shadow of a sharp claw appeared. Shortly after, an explosion sounded in the air, and Gong Sheng forcefully blocked Gao Han's attack. "Boss, what kind of origin spirit does this idiotic prince have to actually be able to block Commander Gao's attack?" Jean de Bayo's perception was very strong. Seeing that Gong Sheng's strength wasn't weak, Jean de Bayo couldn't help but ask. Tian also frowned. Until now, Gong Sheng had yet to completely reveal his origin spirit, but he was still able to easily block Gao Han's attack. This was a bit strange. It should be a beast spirit, and it should be a rare feather-type beast spirit. Tian made a guess and said indifferently, Ah, ah. Following that, screams sounded out one after another. Gong Sheng's lackeys all fell onto the ground dead. Ah! Gong Sheng let out a ghostly cry and howl, then shouted angrily, "Bastard, you all dared to kill my men." Nie Tian had a speechless look on his face. This idiotic prince couldn't possibly still think that what I said just now was just a joke, right? Snake's shadow cold hand. Suddenly, Gao Han pierced out with his spear. The aura on the tip of the spear suddenly increased, and the cold air surged. An ice ghost claw actually condensed in the air, attacking towards Gong Sheng. Green Qilin spiky armor. Gong Sheng felt that the aura of the snake's shadow cold hand was very strong. A trace of a sinister smile immediately appeared on Gong Sheng's face, and soon after, he shouted out in a deep voice. Immediately, a green light flashed past Gong Sheng's body, and in the next moment, a green spiky image appeared. The spiky image was like a hedgehog that had sensed danger. Danger! Nie Tian suddenly sensed something. Without any hesitation, he pierced out with sword end heaven slash, and a vigorous sword aura pervaded out. Bang! 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 The sword aura was like water as it pervaded over and blocked countless of the green spikes. However, there were still a few that were not blocked. The green spikes directly pierced through the snake's shadow cold hand and shot towards Gao Han like a sharp arrow that left the bow. Ah! Gao Han screamed out, and his figure was immediately sent flying. After landing on the ground, a few bloody holes appeared on Gao Han's body, and he immediately spurted out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, Nie Tian acted in time and used his sword aura to block the green spikes. Otherwise, Gao Han would have definitely become a sieve and would definitely not be able to survive. You? Gong Sheng looked at Nie Tian in astonishment. He didn't expect that Nie Tian's casual sword would actually be able to block his green Qilin spiky armor. The green Qilin spiky armor was a rank 4 spirit equipment. Other than being able to block one of the attacks, another important function was to explode out an attack that was comparable to that of a giant spirit realm martial artist in a critical moment. The green Qilin spiky armor was forged using a special material. It could automatically absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth, replenish it within a day, and then explode out with a giant spirit realm martial artist attack. Gong Sheng had once relied on this secret technique of the green Qilin spiky armor to kill many strong martial artists. This time, he actually didn't manage to kill Gao Han, which was really out of his expectations. However, what surprised him even more was still Nie Tian. This guy who was only at the first level of the Wanxiang realm actually blocked a giant spirit realm martial artist attack. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't dare to believe it. Gao Han, are you alright? Nie Tian didn't care about Gong Sheng and asked while looking at Gao Han. Gao Han's strength couldn't be considered strong, but he could be considered to be loyal. He was very suitable to protect Heaven Luo City. Thank you, City Lord, for your help. This subordinate is fine. Gao Han stood up with difficulty. His face was a little pale, but his life wasn't in danger. Take these 2 spirit pills. Nie Tian threw a foundation pill and a blood essence pill over. Thank you, City Lord. Gao Han thanked and quickly took the spirit pills. Chapter 218. Nie Tian didn't think that Gong Sheng would have something as good as the green Qilin spiked armor. If he guessed correctly, the green Qilin spiked armor not only had amazing defense, but could also burst out with a giant spirit realm level attack. It was really good and very suitable for Nie Euro. A 4th rank spirit tool could of course change its size at will, so Nie Tian didn't have to worry about whether it would fit or not. What do you want? Gong Sheng sensed that Nie Tian was looking at him with bad intentions and suddenly felt like a rabbit being stared at by a wolf. He shivered and said in horror. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "You followed me for so long, all the way to Heaven Luo City, and specially came to give me a green Qilin spiked armor. If I don't accept it, wouldn't it be a waste of your good intentions?" From Gong Sheng's previous battle with Gao Han, the defensive power of the Cyan Qilin spiked armor was definitely not below that of Jean de Bao's Golden Thunder battle armor. Furthermore, it could also be used for an explosive attack. For Nyero to wear it, it was truly perfect. Gong Sheng glanced at the corpse on the ground. It was only at this moment that he truly felt the danger. Tian was simply a madman who dared to kill anyone. Why would he care about his identity as a prince of the Rising Sun Empire? Damn, this young master is in danger now. Why haven't those two secret guards appeared? Gong Sheng cursed in his heart, his face finally showing fear. Tian guessed what Gong Sheng was thinking and smiled faintly. Don't think too much. The two secret guards following you won't appear. If I guess correctly, there are already two corpses now. You. As soon as Tian said this, the fear on Gong Sheng's face suddenly increased. He never thought that Tian would actually know that there were two secret guards following him. But it didn't make sense. These two secret guards had never appeared before. How could Tian know of their existence? Gong Sheng looked and was suddenly shocked to find that the middle-aged martial artist beside Tian had disappeared. Immediately, the fear on his face became even more intense, even turning into despair. Qiushan cultivated the dragon whale's 7 breaths secret art, and only a 4th-tier alchemist or a true element boundary master could see through his true strength. Gong Sheng was just a weakling in the 9th level of the all-creation realm. How could he see through Qiushan's strength? Therefore, he had always thought that Qiushan was just an ordinary guard and did not pay much attention to him. What? Is young Master Sheng afraid? Tian smiled playfully, enjoying Gong Sheng's expression of despair and fear. These *T princes were usually very arrogant, but when it came to the real critical moment, they all turned into useless eggs. I'm afraid of your mother. Suddenly, Gong Sheng roared angrily and slapped out with his palm. A cold and sharp claw struck towards Tian. Big brother Tian, be careful, Nyero cried out. Jean de Bayo and the others also tensed up. Tian's face was calm, as if he already knew that Gong Sheng would suddenly make a move. However, he did not care about Gong Sheng's attack at all. He took a step forward, and the proud sword Heavenly Wings appeared on his back. The sword's shadows condensed into wings that were a few meters long, looking very domineering. At the same time, a pair of green wings also appeared on Gong Sheng's back. It was a pair of solid wings made of flesh. With a flap of the wings, Gong Sheng's figure leaped up to 100 meters high in the sky. However, when he opened his eyes, Tian was actually right in front of him, standing opposite of him. You? Gong Sheng was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. The fear on his face was magnified infinitely in his eyes. You want to leave just like that? How can it be so easy? With a cold smile, Tian's whole body released a strong, killing intent. He had long guessed that Gong Sheng's origin spirit was a feather-type origin spirit, so he had predicted it in advance. Just now, Gong Sheng was just a feint. His real goal was to directly escape. It must be said that this was the first time that Gong Sheng had offended the smartest person so far. Unfortunately, Tian was smarter than him. Damn, boss actually knows flying-type martial skills too. Jean de Bayo looked at the proud sword wings on Tian's back, and the shock in his heart was written on his fat face. Big brother Tian is really amazing. Qiu Ling-er's small face also revealed an envious expression. Teacher, Zhang Yifeng was so shocked that he couldn't say anything. Of course, he is my big brother Tian. Nyero was very pleased with herself. Her small face was extremely proud. On the other hand, Tang Yuyu, who was at the side, was very calm and said indifferently, I also have wings. Right after she finished speaking, the sound of wings unfolding could be heard in the sky. Then, 9 pairs of black wings appeared on Tang Yuyu's back, and every pair was a few meters long. However, she only casually displayed them for a moment, then kept the 9 pairs of wings. Jean de Bayo and the others were dumbstruck. Tang Yuyu was too much of a shock. Does she think that everyone has wings? Gao Han and the other guards were even more stunned. All of them were fiercely rubbing their eyes, as if they were in a dream. One Tian was already enough to shock them, but this Tang Yuyu was actually also an extraordinary character. City Lord, who exactly are you? Why are even the people around you so abnormal? Gao Han raised his head and looked at Tian, feeling that even his tailbone was cold. In midair, Niet Tianling smiled and said, "Since you are so anxious to die, how can I let you leave alive? I have the green shield and spiked armor. Do you think you can kill me?" Finally, for the first time, Gong Sheng dared to speak with a sinister expression. "You will know after you try." Niet Tian faintly smiled. Immediately after, the energy in his body circulated, and the terrifying aura he emitted became stronger and stronger. One sword illuminating the night. As Niet Tian stabbed out with his sword, the sword chi that filled the air instantly condensed, and a 10-meter-long sword shadow rushed towards Gong Sheng. Currently, the proud sword chi and star soul sword chi that Niet Tian condensed were even denser, and the power that erupted from them was even more terrifying. At this moment, Niet Tian already felt that the power of the star soul sword chi seemed to be above the proud sword chi. And as Niet Tian's strength increased, the power of the star soul sword chi in his body increased, and the star soul sword chi became even more terrifying. The green shield and spiked armor was just right, and it allowed Niet Tian to see how strong his current attack was. Eagle piercing the sky. Niet Tian's attack was fierce, and Gong Sheng also became ruthless. For the first time, a Yuan spirit appeared behind him, and it was actually a protruding green eagle. Ayo! The protruding green eagle let out an ear-piercing cry, and immediately clawed down with its claws. Bang! With a dull impact, the sword shadow rose to the sky, and the protruding green eagle couldn't block the huge sword shadow, and one of its wings was directly pierced. Ah! Gong Sheng let out a blood-curdling scream, and immediately blood flowed out his right arm, and he couldn't stand in the air. Yet Tianling sneered and muttered, "Idiot!" If Gong Sheng relied on the defense of the green shield and spiked armor, he might be able to hold on for a while, but he used his Yuan spirit and simply became a live target for Niet Tian. However, even if the green shield and spiked armor could defend against Niet Tian's attack, the sharp sword chi was still something that Gong Sheng couldn't withstand. Therefore, after a long time, he would definitely be defeated, just that he wouldn't be defeated so quickly. Shua, completely not giving Gong Sheng any chance to counterattack, Niet Tian stabbed out with his sword, and the murderous sword chi flew past. In the air, a smear of fresh blood spurted out, and Gong Sheng had already become a headless corpse. Niet Tian's wings shook, and with a wave of his hand, a cyan-colored flexible armor appeared in his palm. Chapter 219. Brother Niet Tian. As soon as Niet Tian landed, Nie Yuro skipped over to him. Her face was full of pride. She was even happier than if she had defeated her opponent. "Xiao Yuro, the cyan shield and spiked armor is yours." Niet Tian tapped Nie Yuro's head lightly and handed the cyan shield and spiked armor to her. "Thank you, Brother Niet Tian." Nie Yuro was overjoyed. She hugged the cyan shield and spiked armor in her arms. At this moment, Niet Tian noticed Qiu Ling's desolate expression. He suddenly thought of something. He took out a gray robe from his time ring and handed it to Qiu Ling. This is a third-rank spiritual array robe. It can block spiritual arrays below the third rank. It's yours." Previously at the Yuan Chamber of Commerce, Zhang Yifeng obtained the Purple Sun Pill Cauldron, Qiu Shan obtained the Wild World Defying Blade Technique, and now Nie Yuro had a cyan shield and spiked armor. Qiu Ling, on the other hand, had nothing. Therefore, Niet Tian gave the robe he snatched from Fan Jinji to her. Although the robe was only third rank, its value was not lower than a fourth-rank spiritual artifact. In fact, it was slightly higher. This was because the one who made the robe was a spiritual array master. The status of a spiritual array master was higher than that of an alchemist or a blacksmith. Qiu Ling hesitated for a moment, but still accepted it. She said in a low voice, "Thank you, Brother Niet Tian." Niet Tian smiled faintly. But Tang Yuyu was unhappy. She pouted and said, "Niet Tian, they all have it. Why don't I have it?" Niet Tian was stunned. He said, "You are so strong. These things are useless to you. I'll give Tang 13 to you another day." Tang Yuyu was stunned. For the first time, she understood Niet Tian's meaning. Her face couldn't help but blush. A moment later, Qiu also returned. The two bodyguards had already been taken care of. Nietian asked Gao Han to take care of the corpses. Then, he brought everyone back to the mayor's mansion. After returning to the city lord's mansion, Nietian immediately returned to his room and began to cultivate. This trip to the auction made Nietian feel a sense of urgency. He had to improve his strength as soon as possible. Although with his current strength, he could fight against a giant spirit realm martial artist if he had an astral soul. But without an astral soul, fighting against an ordinary first-level giant spirit realm martial artist would be extremely strenuous. If his opponent was a genius cultivator like Ding Yifan or Aoki Lily, even if Nietian had astral souls, he would not be confident he could win unless he used an ultimate move like the 3 seals of the divine battle god. Nietian had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Within a month, he was prepared to raise his strength to the 5th tier of the Wanxiang Adepts. The higher one's strength was, the more astral energy one would be able to awaken, and the easier it would be to inscribe an astral soul. At the same time, the night was like water. In a hidden place in Tianluo City, Emosher sat cross-legged with his eyes closed and his brows furrowed. Mr. Z and Feng Lianxing sensed the oppressive atmosphere at the scene. They both looked fearful, not daring to speak. Master, why do we give up on the Crypt Elves? With the help of the Crypt Elves, we can quickly locate the exact location of the Dragon Bloodstone. Once we have the Dragon Bloodstone, Master's body and strength will recover rapidly. We won't be afraid of anyone. Mr. Z finally broke the silence. Although he seemed to disagree with Emosher, his tone was still respectful and did not dare to blame him. Emosher opened his devilish eyes and said in a deep voice, "The Crypt Elves are important, but our strength is limited. If we continue to fight, our identities will definitely be exposed. If Master White Flame finds out about our existence, we'll be in trouble." Master is right. Mr. Z is being reckless. Mr. Z immediately understood and nodded. Emosher was indeed the original body of the Doomsday Flame. His wisdom was even higher than that of ordinary martial artists. This was not the Burial Cloud Abyss, where there were abyss restrictions. Powerhouses did not dare to enter. If their identities were exposed, who knew how many people would covet them? Who wouldn't want the 13th Demon Fire on the Demon Fire list? By then, they would not even be able to protect themselves, let alone the Dragon Bloodstone. Mr. Z had taken human form and was not weak, but he was only a true element realm martial artist. If he met a real powerhouse, he had no chance of winning. Before Emosher grew up, they had to be careful. Sir Emosher. At this time, Feng Lianxing, who had been standing at the side like a fool, finally opened his mouth and asked tentatively, "Who is this Master White Flame you speak of?" Emosher glanced at Feng Lianxing, and the latter suddenly felt a chill in his soul. Emosher seemed to remember something and asked, "Who was the person who took the Crypt Elves today?" Feng Lianxing was stunned for a moment, and then said, "Sir Emosher is referring to Grandmaster Gu Yi behind the dwarf. Yes, a 6th-tier alchemist. Who is he?" Emosher's eyes shot out a glimmer of light as he asked. Feng Lianxing's heart jumped, and he thought to himself, looking at Sir Emosher, they wouldn't have any conflict with Grandmaster Gu Yi, right? Our Fengqin Empire can't afford to offend that old man Gu Yi. Feng Lianxing introduced Gu Yi's identity to Emosher, and then said, "Grandmaster Gu Yi is a red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. Even my brother has to bow when he sees him. So, your Fengqin Empire doesn't dare to offend Gu Yi?" Mr. Z asked coldly. Feng Lianxing's throat moved, and he nodded, "Indeed, we don't dare." Behind Gu Yi was the Alchemist Guild in the 3,000 small worlds, except for the 4 great families who would dare to offend him. Even if Feng Lianxing borrowed 100,000 gallbladders, he wouldn't dare to act rashly in front of Gu Yi. What if I have to offend him? Emosher suddenly stood up and asked with a stern face. "Sir Emosher, this." Feng Lianxing was drenched in cold sweat, and he was obviously frightened. His tailbone was cold, and he didn't know how to answer Emosher. Offending Gu Yi was too big of a matter, Even if Feng Lianqing was the king of the Fengqin Empire, he wouldn't be able to take the blame. But there seemed to be some deep hatred between Mo, Shi, and Gu Yi, so he could only choose one of them. If he had to make a choice, the choice would have to be made by Fengqin Empire's emperor, and Feng Lianqing wouldn't be able to make the decision. Mo Shi laughed in disdain and didn't make things difficult for Feng Lianqing. Instead, he said, "Send someone to spread the news about the Dragon Bloodstone. The faster the better." Spread the news about the Dragon Bloodstone? Feng Lianqing went into a daze, and he even suspected that he had heard wrongly. Master, Mr. Z didn't understand why Mo Shi would do such a thing, and he had a puzzled look on his face. Mo Shi said faintly, "Gu Yi bought the crypt spirits," which means that he already knows about the Dragon Bloodstone, and he will be able to locate the location of the Dragon Bloodstone very soon. If we don't do anything, wouldn't we be giving away the Dragon Bloodstone on a silver platter? Master, what you mean is, Mr. Z wasn't stupid, and he seemed to have understood something, and a hint of purple light flashed past his beautiful face. Mo Shi nodded, then sent a voice transmission to Mr. Z. Only by spreading out the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone will we be able to attract more powers. Since Fengqin Empire doesn't dare to offend Gu Yi, then we can only find someone who dares to offend Gu Yi to cooperate with. Chapter 220. It had to be said that Mo Shi's move was truly ruthless. Not only was he ruthless to Gu Yi, he was ruthless to himself as well. Once the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone was spread, it would definitely set off a bloodbath in the Nanshan region. At that time, Tianluo City would probably become the cruelest battlefield. Everyone knew that Tianluo Mountain had Dragon Bloodstones, and it belonged to the strongest. There were no rules or laws in the world of martial arts. The strong reigned supreme. This was the iron law of this world. Whoever had the bigger fist was the boss. Reason is a bitch, always on the side of the bigger fist. The 10 demonic weapons had no choice but to take such a risk. Now that Gu Yi had obtained the crypt spirit, he had the absolute initiative. If Mo Shi did nothing, then the Dragon Bloodstone would belong to Gu Yi. This was the outcome that Mo Shi did not want to see. The next morning, in the countless taverns and tea houses of Danwu City and Heavenluo City, everyone was discussing a piece of news. Dragon Bloodstone. Have you heard? Tianluo Mountain has Dragon Bloodstones. My dear mother, the Dragon Bloodstone. Dragon Bloodstone? I heard that it's a top-grade stone mine that's equivalent to a 7th-grade medicinal herb. Moreover, it contains dragon's blood, which is a peerless treasure that can improve a martial artist's martial body. That's not all. Dragon blood can also raise the level of the spiritual body of heaven and earth. It was said that a single drop of dragon blood could raise the rank of a heavenly spirit body by 1 level. It was simply heaven-defying. I just don't know if this news is true or false. I also don't know where it came from. It shouldn't be fake, right? There's no smoke without fire. Yesterday, during the Yuan Chamber of Commerce's auction, Grandmaster Gu Yi bought a crypt sprite. According to old Mr. Lin Yifeng, crypt sprites are experts in surveying stone mines. I think that Grandmaster Gu Yi bought the crypt sprite for the sake of surveying Dragon Bloodstone. Sigh. Now that you mention it, it does seem to be the case. If the Dragon Bloodstone is so precious, how did the news spread? Could have been Grandmaster Gu Yi who revealed it? You idiot! Do you think Master Gu Yi is as stupid as you? Of course, a secret like the Dragon Bloodstone should be kept to oneself. Why would he reveal it? I think he must have accidentally leaked it. I think so too. A rare treasure like the Dragon Bloodstone had appeared in Tianluo Mountain. There will be a good show to watch below. I reckon that in less than a day, this news will spread throughout the entire Nanshan territory. By then, the deity transformation sect and the Qinquan Palace will all send people here. Yes, the Dragon Bloodstone is a treasure of heaven and earth, and it might even alarm the other 3 regions. It might even attract the great figures of Sumi's spiritual capital. Overnight, the news of the Dragon Bloodstone spread throughout Heavenluo City and Danwu City. The 2 cities were practically seething with excitement. Niet Tian, Qiushan, and Zhang Yifeng were walking in Danwu City, and all they heard was the matter of Tian Luo Mountain and the Dragon Bloodstone. Sir, are these people crazy? It's impossible for Tian Luo Mountain to have dragon bloodstones, Qiushan said as he walked behind Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled faintly. It's not that they're crazy, it's the Doomsday Flame that's crazy. To actually publicize the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone to the public. How ruthless. Although Nie Tian hadn't seen the Doomsday Flame yet, he had already guessed that the person who spread the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone must be the Doomsday Flame. Ever since the Wind Qin Empire and the Blue Cloud Empire changed cities, Nie Tian had some suspicions. At the auction yesterday, Feng Lianqing was so determined to get the Crypt Elf. At that time, Nie Tian was already sure that the one hiding behind the Wind Qin Empire and manipulating everything was definitely the Doomsday Flame. But what Nie Tian didn't expect was that this precious stone mine was actually the Dragon Bloodstone. Dragon Bloodstone, Dragon Bloodstone. When Nie Tian heard this news, he almost jumped up in excitement. Because the Dragon Bloodstone was on Tian Luo Mountain, and his current identity was the Lord of Tian Luo City. From a moral point of view, the Dragon Bloodstone on Tian Luo Mountain should belong to Nie Tian. But this was a world of martial arts where the strong were revered, and there was never any morality. Hence, it was absolutely impossible for Nie Tian to hog the Dragon Bloodstone for himself. Dragon Bloodstone, humph humph. Nie Tian couldn't help but be somewhat excited in his heart. But what he was thinking about was far from as simple as the Dragon Bloodstone. Go! Let's hurry to see Gu Yi. Nie Tian quickened his pace. Although Qiushan had doubts in his heart, he didn't ask much. Very soon, the three people arrived at Danwu City's Alchemist Guild. Danwu City's Alchemist Guild style was the same as Blue Cloud City's Alchemist Guild. A spherical building with a lustrous glaze, looking abnormally dazzling, crystal clear, like a huge spirit pill. But the specifications were much larger than Blue Cloud City's. If Blue Cloud City's Alchemist Guild was a quail's egg, then Danwu City's Alchemist Guild was a goose's egg. Danwu City's Alchemist Guild is so imposing. Zhang Yifeng looked at the building in front of him and could not help but say, Nie Tian only brought Qiushan and Zhang Yifeng to visit Gu Yi this time. Qiushan was a guard, while Zhang Yifeng was an alchemist master. Naturally, they should come to the Alchemist Guild to take a look and let him broaden his horizons. May I ask, sir, are you Lord Nie Tian? The moment Nie Tian's figure appeared, a beautiful waitress in revealing clothes, Lu Yingying, appeared. She gave Nie Tian a radiant smile, like a peach blossom. Bring me to see Gu Yi. Nie Tian didn't find it strange. He had already told Tong Fu yesterday. Hence, Gu Yi definitely knew that he was coming and was just making some preparations in advance. All right, please follow me, Lord Nie Tian. My name is Lu Yingying. Grandmaster Gu specially asked me to receive you. Lu Yingying's voice was very sweet. She walked in front and led the way. Occasionally, she would glance at Nie Tian from the corner of her eyes. She felt strange. Why was Nie Tian looked so highly upon by Grandmaster Gu Yi at such a young age? Lu Yingying brought Nie Tian and the others through a long corridor and came to a luxurious room. She signaled for Nie Tian and the others to wait for a moment. She lightly knocked on the door and said in a sweet voice, Grandmaster Gu, Lord Nie Tian is here. Bang! The moment Lu Yingying's voice landed, the room's door opened. Gu Yi walked out with a smile. Old brother Nie, you're finally here. Old brother missed you so much. Gu Yi was very enthusiastic. It was as though he and Nie Tian were old friends that had known each other for hundreds of years. When Lu Yingying saw this scene, her expression was petrified. She felt dizzy. Is he still the solemn and serious Master Gu? How did he become an amiable grandpa? On the other hand, Lu Yingying was also deeply shocked by Nie Tian's aura. Facing such a warm welcome from Gu Yi, Nie Tian's expression didn't change. The corner of his mouth only curled up slightly. One had to know that Gu Yi was a red-clothed elder. Who exactly is Lord Nie Tian? Even when Grandmaster Gu met the Emperor of the Shui Wu Empire, he wasn't this enthusiastic. Lu Yingying thought to herself. The shock on her face was even more obvious. Grandmaster Gu, let's go in and talk. Yet Tian wasn't moved by Gu Yi's enthusiasm. His reaction was very calm. He only smiled faintly. He knew that this old fellow wasn't someone who was easy to deal with. Previously, in the burial cloud abyss, he almost caused Niet Tian's death. Good, good, good. Gu Yi said good thrice and invited Niet Tian and the others into the room. Chapter 221. After entering the room, Niet Tian discovered that there were other guests in Gu Yi's room. Ding Yifun and Aoki Lily. Old Gu, it's quite lively here. Niet Tian smiled as he looked at Ding Yifun and Aoki Lily. Niet Tian had seen Ding Yifun before, but this was the first time he was so close to Aoki Lily, and he could feel the latter's peerlessly charming aura. She was an extremely charming woman. Her eyes were long and narrow, and she was bright and enchanting. Her exquisite little face was faintly sparkling like a piece of jade, and one could not help but want to pounce on her and take a few hundred bites. In terms of charm and allure, even Tang Yuyu could not compare to Aoki Lily. City Lord Nya, we meet again. When Ding Yifun saw Niet Tian appear, he forced a smile on his solemn face as a form of greeting to Niet Tian. So this is Mr. Niet Tian. What a young talent. Aoki Lily was smiling like a flower, and she did not look restrained at all. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but Aoki Lily took a few steps toward Niet Tian, and with every step she took, the surrounding charming aura became thicker. Niet Tian could even see the soul-stirring cleavage under her thin red dress, and he could also smell the faint charming fragrance on her body. It was the body fragrance of Aoki Lily, and it was especially intoxicating. Niet Tian frowned slightly, and he cursed in his heart, what a vixen. She's so charming that she can bring calamity to a country. Femme fatale. This was the best way to describe Aoki Lily. Fortunately, Niet Tian's composure was off the charts. He was only agitated for a moment, and his expression did not change. This was the first time Aoki Lily had seen a man maintain his composure in front of her, and it was a young man. Logically speaking, a young man's temperament was at its weakest, and he was the most vulnerable to temptation. However, Niet Tian's gaze was calm as he looked at Aoki Lily, and there was not a hint of lust. Aoki Lily's foxy eyes glanced at Niet Tian, and she was inwardly surprised. He's indeed an extraordinary youth. No wonder Grandmaster Gu Yi praised him so much. Ordinary people wouldn't have his level of self-control. Aoki Lily knew many people, and many of them were geniuses who had made a name for themselves at a young age. However, even though these people were monstrously talented, their minds were very worrisome. Most of their problems were immaturity, arrogance, and even childishness. They were easily tempted and deceived. However, Niet Tian was different. His reaction in front of Aoki Lily was too calm. In fact, he was a little too calm. Miss Lily, you flatter me. Niet Tian faintly smiled and unconsciously distanced himself from Aoki Eureka. He said, Miss Eureka is ranked 10th on the genius list of the Southern Mountain region at such a young age. This is a true young talent. Niet Tian really didn't want to get too close to Aoki Lily. This woman was too tempting, and it was best to stay away from her. Not at all. Aoki Lily's enchanting voice was soft as she said with a smile, Mr. Nietan might say that, but I'm afraid that you are very disdainful of the Southern Mountain region's genius list. Although it was a joke, Niet Tian's heart skipped a beat because he was indeed very disdainful of the genius list. Even though Ding Yifun and Aoki Lily were both rare geniuses, as long as Niet Tian was given a little time, he could easily step on them. Everyone, please take a seat. Gu Yi didn't want to listen to the two of them anymore. He laughed heartily and said. Everyone took a seat and looked at each other. Niet Tian was a little puzzled. Why would Ding Yifun and Aoki Lily appear here? Moreover, Gu Yi seemed to have purposely let him meet these two. Could there be some kind of trade? As luck would have it, Niet Tian was right again. Before he came, Gu Yi and the Dune Association had indeed made some trade. However, the trade involved Niet Tian. That was why Gu Yi let Niet Tian meet Ding Yifun and the rest. It turned out that yesterday, Ding Yifun had already found Gu Yi and directly expressed his intentions. He wanted to know just what precious stone mine Gu Yi discovered for him to be so persistent in wanting the crypt sprite. Gu Yi knew that the matter could not be concealed, so he told Ding Yifan and reminded him to keep it a secret. Anyway, the Dragon Bloodstone needed to be mined. Letting the Dayuan Association's people know, even if they had another partner, it was not bad. But what Gu Yi and Ding Yifan did not expect was that the next morning, the news of the Dragon Bloodstone spread throughout Danwu City and Heaven Luo City. And looking at the trend, in a few days' time, the entire Southern Mountain region would know. Gu Yi naturally knew that this news was definitely not leaked by Ding Yifan. Although Ding Yifan was young, he was rather shrewd and meticulous in doing things. How could he be a simple person to guess so many things just from Crypt Sprite? Hence, the one who leaked the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone was definitely someone else. As for who it was, Gu Yi was still unclear. When Ye Tian saw Gu Yi looking at him with a face full of ill intentions, he chuckled and said, "Old Gu, if you have something to say, just say it." Although Gu Yi, this old fellow, was a little cunning, he was someone who had cooperated with Ye Tian before after all. The two of them could be considered to have been through life and death together. Moreover, Gu Yi still maintained a trace of fear towards Ye Tian. "Old brother Nye, since it's like this, old brother won't beat around the bush." Gu Yi chuckled and said, "You already know about the matter of the Dragon Bloodstone, right?" "I know." Ye Tian nodded with a smile. This stinking brat indeed knew long ago. Seeing Ye Tian's indifferent reaction, Gu Yi's heart jolted as he said hatefully, how could he know that Ye Tian knew about the Dragon Bloodstone, which was the matter just now? Gu Yi immediately smiled and said, "Now that the Dragon Bloodstone has caused an uproar in the city, what do you think about it, old brother Nye?" Ye Tian glanced at Gu Yi and thought to himself, this old fox, even though he said that he wouldn't beat around the bush, isn't he still trying to test me? Faintly smiling, Ye Tian said, "The Dragon Bloodstone is in Heaven Luo Mountain, and Heaven Luo Mountain is Heaven Luo City's territory. I'm Heaven Luo City's city lord, so the Dragon Bloodstone is my personal property. Do I need to have any opinion about it?" Personal property? Gu Yi's old face stiffened as he gulped down a mouthful of saliva. The wrinkles on his face seemed to be asking Ye Tian, "Can you swallow the Dragon Bloodstone?" Although Gu Yi knew Ye Tian's character and was already mentally prepared, when Ye Tian said this, he really couldn't accept it for a moment. Ding Yifan and Aoki Lily were even more stunned as they looked at Ye Tian in disbelief. They almost couldn't believe that Ye Tian could say what he had just said so easily. Gu Yi had already told the two of them earlier that Ye Tian was a rather domineering person and not an easy character to deal with. However, Ding Yifan and Aoki Lily didn't expect that Ye Tian would be so domineering, saying that the Dragon Bloodstone was his personal property the moment he opened his mouth. Could it be that he wanted to keep the Dragon Bloodstone for himself? If it wasn't for the fact that he had a certain understanding of Ye Tian, Ding Yifan would definitely think that the youth in front of him was either a lunatic or a fool. Chapter 222. After sharing a portion, Ye Tian finally took a small bite of the fatty meat in his mouth. This eased Gu Yi's stiff face a little. Actually, if the city lord of Heaven Luo City was not Ye Tian, but someone else, Gu Yi would not even bother and would directly mine. But the current owner of Heaven Luo City was Ye Tian, so he had to be cautious. Ha! Brother Nye is indeed a generous person. Gu Yi chuckled as he spoke words that went against his conscience. Of course we are friends. Ye Tian smiled faintly and looked at Gu Yi with a smug look. But at this moment, Ding Yifan was a little unhappy. He asked cold. City Lord Nye said to share a portion of the pie. I wonder how much is this portion? Ding Yifan originally thought that Ye Tian's interference was just to freeload a little. He did not expect that this fellow wanted to take away the entire cake. Ye Tian naturally heard the anger in Ding Yifan's tone, but he did not even look at him and said faintly, "A portion is a portion. As for whether it is a big portion or a small portion, that depends on how much effort young Master Ding is willing to put in." Ye Tian knew that the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone had already been spread. It was impossible for him to protect the dragon bloodstone alone. He had to rely on other forces to have a chance of protecting Heaven Luo City. And the Alchemist Guild behind Gu Yi and the Deyuan Chamber of Commerce behind Ding Yifan were not bad forces. Gu Yi was the red-robed elder of the Alchemist Guild. Even in the 3,000 small worlds, he was a well-known figure. And the Deyuan Chamber of Commerce was one of the 7 top chambers of commerce in the Martial Competition Business Union. It was also a good partner. Most importantly, Ding Yifan and Aoki Lily were smart people and would not do stupid things. They were much stronger than people like Feng Wuk and Gong Sheng. Nie Tian liked to work with smart people. And the most crucial point was that Nie Tian did not care about the Dragon Bloodstone at all. What he cared about was the thing behind the Dragon Bloodstone. Yes, it was the thing behind the Dragon Bloodstone. The world only knew that the Dragon Bloodstone was a rare treasure, but very few people knew what it was and how it was formed. Nie Tian had studied the Dragon Bloodstone in his previous life and was very clear about its formation process. The most precious thing about the Dragon Bloodstone was the dragon blood it contained. Ordinary people would think that the dragon blood in the Dragon Bloodstone was not real. Divine dragons were ancient sacred beasts that had gone extinct in ancient times. So, how could there be real dragon blood? However, Nie Tian knew that the dragon blood in the Dragon Bloodstone was the real dragon blood, which was contained in the dragon chi and blood essence of a divine dragon. The reason why the Dragon Bloodstone was called the Dragon Bloodstone was because it was really related to the ancient divine dragon. The formation process of the Dragon Bloodstone was formed after the death of a divine dragon. The dragon chi and blood essence did not dissipate and seeped into the ground, eventually fusing with the underground rocks. After a long period of tempering, it became a Dragon Bloodstone. The fact that Tian Luo Mountain had a Dragon Bloodstone meant that a divine dragon had once fallen on Tian Luo Mountain. After a divine dragon died, not only would its dragon chi and blood essence not be destroyed, more importantly, its dragon soul would not disappear. The reason why Nie Tian did not care about the Dragon Bloodstone was that his target was the dragon's soul. If Nie Tian could find the dragon's soul in Heaven Luo Mountain, it would be much more valuable than the Dragon Bloodstone. The dragon was an ancient sacred beast. It was an existence that surpassed rank 9 spiritual beasts. The strength of its soul was self-evident. This was why Nie Tian was so excited when he heard about the Dragon Bloodstone. The Dragon Bloodstone was nothing in his eyes, but the ancient dragon soul was different. It was definitely something that could shock the world, even more terrifying than the Doomsday Flame. If Nie Tian could get the ancient dragon soul, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. But it was too early to think about the dragon soul. Nie Tian had to protect Heaven Luo City first. The secret of the Dragon Bloodstone was made public. Not long later, Heaven Luo City would become the target of public criticism. At that time, everyone's spearhead would be pointed at Nie Tian because he was the city lord of Heaven Luo City. Therefore, what Nie Tian needed to do now was to find a trustworthy partner. Gu Yi was his first consideration. The Deyuan Merchant Association was not bad too. Also, Nie Tian was very sure that others did not know about the existence of the ancient dragon soul. Even in the Heaven Realm, there were very few people who knew about the mystery of the Dragon Bloodstone's formation. In these 3,000 small worlds, there was absolutely no one who knew about this secret. What does City Lord Nie mean? Ding Yifan was slightly stunned. The gaze he looked at Nie Tian was already somewhat impatient. Although Gu Yi was very respectful to Nie Tian, Ding Yifan did not have such good patience. Also, if not for Gu Yi at the side, Ding Yifan would have attacked Nie Tian already. He really could not understand how a small city lord of a third-rate empire who only had the strength of a manifestation realm could have such great confidence to actually want to keep the Dragon Bloodstone for himself the moment he opened his mouth. Nie Tian finally glanced at Ding Yifan and said in a neither fast nor slow manner, "Young Lord Ding, didn't I make myself very clear? I am a city lord of Heaven Luo City. The Dragon Bloodstone on Heaven Luo Mountain belongs to me in the first place. If I asked the Deyuan Merchant Association for help, at most they would only be able to hire a bodyguard. Then, The bodyguard's reward would naturally depend on how much effort he put in. If someone were to interfere and want to take away the dragon bloodstone, it would definitely be impossible. In the end, Nyetian was no longer polite, and his tone became much deeper. Nyetianyu, Ding Yifan was, after all, young, and being made speechless by Nyetian's few words, he immediately felt that there was a lump of stuffiness pressing down on his chest, and he was unable to swallow it, nor was he able to spit out. Young Master Ding, don't be angry, don't be angry. Gu Yi quickly persuaded with a smile, as the atmosphere was a little tense. At this time, Aoki Lily also opened her mouth. She swayed her seductive but chuckled and said, Yifan, don't be angry. I feel that what Nyetian City Lord said is very reasonable. The Dragon Bloodstone is in Heaven Luo Mountain after all. As the City Lord of Heaven Luo City, it is not wrong for Mr. Nyetian to say that the Dragon Bloodstone is his personal property. Nyetian glanced at Aoki Lily and said indifferently, Seems like there are still smart people in the Diyuan Merchant Association. Nyetianyu. Ding Yifan's face was full of anger, and he was speechless. Nyetian said that Aoki Lily was a smart person. Wasn't that the same as saying that he, Ding Yifan, was an idiot? Ever since he was born, Ding Yifan had only heard praises. No one had ever looked down on him, and no one had ever dared to say that he was an idiot. Ding Yifan glared at Nyetian fiercely. The fury in his heart rose as he roared. Even if you are the City Lord of Heaven Luo City, are you able to keep the Dragon Bloodstone in Heaven Luo Mountain? Originally, in Ding Yifan's opinion, Gu Yi and the Diyuan Merchant Association should be the leaders of this cooperation. However, the moment Nyetian appeared, he looked down on them with a high and mighty attitude, and he did not give them any room for negotiation. What the hell is this? Chapter 223. Nyetian's expression was calm, looking very reasonable. But from Ding Yifan's point of view, Nyetian was simply pestering endlessly. At the end of the day, the Yuan Association was still a bodyguard under Nyetian. As for how much benefits this bodyguard could get, it all depended on how much Nyetian rewarded him. Aoki Yuri was also a little speechless, and said in her heart, Just who is this Nyetian? Why does he give me a feeling that he is unfathomable? Aoki Yuri believed that she had some ability to see through people, but facing Nyetian, the more she wanted to see through him, the more confused she became. Nyetian, what if the Yuan Association doesn't want to be your bodyguard? Ding Yifan was completely infuriated and bellowed. Nyetian's expression was still calm and said indifferently, Young Master Ding, do you think that I must look for the Yuan Association to cooperate with me? If I wanna, I can find a stronger partner in the blink of an eye. Do you believe me? Nyetianyu. Ding Yifan stood up. His face was extremely gloomy, and he was so angry that he was about to vomit blood. Nyetian was simply impervious to everything, and he did not put the Yuan Association in his eyes at all. Yifan. Aoki Yuri hurriedly stood up and blocked in front of Ding Yifan. She knew that although this younger brother of hers was talented and scheming, he was also too arrogant and impulsive at times. This was the Alchemist Guild, and Gu Yi obviously valued Nyetian very much. If Ding Yifan could not bear it and made a move on Nyetian, then the matter of the Dragon Bloodstone would be completely over, and the Yuan Association might even become enemies with the Alchemist Guild because of this. This was what Aoki Yuri did not want to see. It must be said that Aoki Yuri was a few years older than Ding Yifan, but the way she handled things was much more stable. Ding Yifan was intelligent and scheming, but once things did not develop in the direction he expected, he would instantly lose his rationality. Both of you calm down. Calm down. If there's anything to say, we can talk it out. Gu Yi hurriedly stood up to mediate. He did not expect that the two of them would quarrel to this extent. Nyetian and Ding Yifan. One was too strong, and the other was too arrogant. No one was willing to give in. If they continued to fight, the situation would only become more and more tense. Nyetian shrugged and said with a faint smile, I've been talking to them. Ding Yifan looked at Nyetian, who had a warm expression on his face, and the anger in his heart burned more and more fiercely. Nyetian was really someone who could anger people to death without paying for it. Aoki Eureka nodded at Ding Yifan. signaling for him to calm down. She then looked at Nye Tian with a charming smile and said, City Lord Nye, just say it. If Grandmaster Gu Yi and the Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce do their best to help you keep the Dragon Bloodstone, how much are you willing to pay as a reward? That's right. That Lily girl is right. Little brother Nye, there's no harm in speaking frankly. Big brother is not an outsider. Gu Yi laughed mischievously, stroking his goatee as he echoed. Nye Tian glanced at Aoki Eureka and then at Gu Yi. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, I'd like to hear your opinions first. How much do you want? Aoki Eureka and Gu Yi looked at each other. The former frowned slightly, thought for a while, and said directly, the Dragon Bloodstone is in Tianluo Mountain, but its exact location is unknown. The Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce and Grandmaster Gu Yi are willing to undertake all the exploration and mining work. City Lord Nye does not need to do anything and can directly get the Dragon Bloodstone. Therefore, I suggest that the mined Dragon Bloodstone be divided into 3 parts, equally divided between the 3 parties. Originally, before Nye Tian came, Gu Yi and the Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce had already reached an agreement that the 2 parties would each take 40%, and the remaining 20% would be given to Nye Tian. Moreover, this 20% was fought for by Gu Yi for Nye Tian. According to the Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce's plan, they only planned to give Nye Tian some yuan crystals as compensation, with no share of the Dragon Bloodstone at all. Gu Yi knew that Nye Tian was not easy to deal with, so he fought for 20% for him. Aoki Eureka now finally understood why Gu Yi would fight for 20% for Nye Tian. This guy was simply a dragon whale that could not be fed enough. 20% of the Dragon Bloodstone was obviously not enough to satisfy Nye Tian's appetite. Therefore, Aoki Eureka changed her mind and suggested that the 3 parties divide it equally. City Lord Nye, what do you think? Aoki Eureka could not help but feel a little nervous at this moment, beads of sweat seeping out of her exquisite and beautiful face. Judging from Nye Tian's forceful attitude just now, it was very likely that he would reject such a proposal. Aoki Eureka even planned to let Nye Tian swallow half or more of the Dragon Bloodstone. Nye Tian pondered slightly and did not speak, obviously thinking about something. Brother Nye, is it okay or not? Say something? Gu Yi could not help but ask anxiously. Nye Tian looked at Gu Yi strangely and asked, Gu Yi also agrees to this division? Gu Yi was stunned, then laughed awkwardly and said, as long as Brother Nye agrees, old brother will agree. Gu Yi felt that with Nye Tian's character, he would definitely not be willing to divide it equally among the 3 parties. It was very likely that he would take more than half of the Dragon Bloodstone and leave a small half for him and the Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce. Ding Yifan also became nervous and could not help but look at Nye Tian. Nye Tian suddenly laughed strangely at this moment. Sweeping his gaze around, he said, this division is too unfair to the 2 of you. How about this? This city lord will suffer a little and only ask for 20%. The rest will be divided equally between the 2 of you. Everyone was collectively petrified, looking at Nye Tian in disbelief. That expression seemed to be saying, you're not joking, right? Qiu Shan and Zhang Yifeng also looked at Nye Tian with puzzled expressions. Originally, the latter had already completely occupied the dominant position. In this kind of situation, even if Nye Tian wanted half of the Dragon Bloodstone, Gu Yi and the Great Yuan Chamber of Commerce would also agree. But Nye Tian only wanted 20%. Did he have water in his head, or was he kicked by a donkey? Nye Tian did not care about the others' reactions, and said with a faint smile, everyone, what do you think of this city lord's suggestion? Only at this moment did Gu Yi finally come back to his senses. Laughing heartily, he said, Brother Nye, Big Brother has really misjudged you in the past. I had thought that you... forget it. I won't say any more. From today onwards, you are Big Brother's biological brother. Nye Tian rolled his eyes. Old Man Gu's reaction is too much, isn't it? Didn't I just give you some Dragon Bloodstone? Is it necessary? Ding Yifan and Aoki Lily were clearly very excited, and they looked at each other, not knowing what to say. This feeling was simply like going from heaven to hell, and then from hell to heaven again. It was really too exciting. After waiting for everyone to calm down, Nyetian spoke again. Miss Lily, I have another suggestion. I don't know if the two of you can agree to it. Gu-E and Aoki Lily were stunned for a moment. Especially Gu-E, his old face was stiff, and he thought to himself, "You stinking brat. Don't tell me you're thinking of some tricks again." Nyetian smiled faintly and said, "Rest assured, my suggestion will only be beneficial to us. It will definitely not be harmful." "City Lord Nya, please speak," Aoki Lily said with a sweet smile. Chapter 224. Nyetian's question stunned both Gu-E and Aoki Lily. What Nyetian was worried about was indeed troublesome. The Dragon Bloodstone had caused a huge uproar, and it would soon cause an uproar in the South Mountain region. Even if the important figures of the other three territories and the Sumeru spiritual capital did not interfere, just the various factions of the South Mountain region were enough to give Gu-E and the Diyuan Chamber of Commerce a headache. Even though most of the factions were afraid of Gu-Yi's identity and would not openly snatch the Dragon Bloodstone, it would still be very troublesome for them to do something in the dark. As the saying goes, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. Seeing the confident look on Nyetian's face, Aoki immediately smiled charmingly and said, "If you have any good ideas, City Lord Nya, why don't you tell me?" Nyetian glanced at Aoki Kashiwagi. This woman was more astute than he had imagined. After pausing for a moment, Nyetian said, "I have an idea. Since the Dragon Bloodstone is no longer a secret, why don't we spread the news and hold a Dragon Blood Martial gathering? Each of our three families will take out a portion of the Dragon Bloodstone as a reward for the Dragon Blood Martial gathering. What do you think? Hold the Dragon Blood Martial gathering?" Gu-E was startled and did not understand. However, Aoki Eureka understood Nyetian's meaning and giggled. "City Lord Nya is indeed courageous. This is a very good idea." Gu-E and Ding Yifan looked puzzled as they simultaneously looked at Aoki Lily. The corners of Aoki Lily's lips curled up as she explained, "Since the Dragon Bloodstone is no longer a secret, and there will be people fighting for it no matter what, why don't we do this openly? All forces could register to participate in the Dragon Blood Martial meet, and the winner would naturally obtain the Dragon Bloodstone. In this way, we won't face any obstacles in mining the Dragon Bloodstone. Everyone will even help us protect the Dragon Bloodstone, because that will be the reward for winning the martial meet." At this point, Aoki Yuri's beautiful eyes could not help but linger on Nyetian's body. She thought to herself, "This guy is really too smart." Gu-E and Ding Yifan finally understood and nodded their heads. Needless to say, Nyetian's move was indeed brilliant. Once the Dragon Blood Martial meet started, it would definitely attract the attention of the majority of people. At that time, who would still have the mood to fight for the Dragon Bloodstones? But Tian did this for another deeper reason. He wanted to use the Dragon Blood Martial group to divert everyone's attention. This way, he could focus on the ancient dragon soul. He did not care about the dragon. He did not care about the dragon Tian's dragon. As for the Dragon Bloodstone, he did not care much about it as long as he could get some. "City Lord Nya, I wonder how many Dragon Bloodstones you're planning to take out as the reward for the Dragon Blood Martial meet." At this moment, Ding Yifan's tone towards Nyetian had clearly changed. His previous anger was completely gone, replaced by calmness and even a hint of awe. Tian's mind. Even Ding, Tian were impressed. Nyetian raised his eyebrows and said, "I'm willing to give you 10% of the Dragon Blood gems, and each of you will give me 20%. How about that?" Nyetian raised his eyebrows and said, "I'm willing to take out 10% of the Dragon Bloodstones. How about it?" 20%. He could not help but swallow. His heart ached, but he gritted his teeth and said, "Fine." Nyetian only had 20%, so he could only take out 10%. Gu-E and the Yuan Chamber of Commerce each had 40%. Taking out 20% was not too much. Using half of the Dragon Bloodstones as the Dragon Blood Martial meet's reward would undoubtedly make others pay more attention to the Dragon Blood Martial meet. "Fine." Gu-E nodded. Qingmu Lily and Ding Yifun naturally could not object. Moreover, Qingmu Lily and Ding Yifun were experts of the southern mountain region. They could also participate in the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. If they got a good ranking, they could get back a portion. Nie Tian nodded his head and said, I have a small request. I want the Dragon Blood Martial Meet to be held in Tianluo City. Do you have any objections? No objections. Gu Yi and the rest smiled. Nie Tian had already made such a big concession and even thought of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. Such a small matter, they should agree. Good. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, then it's decided. As for the details of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet, you can decide. I hope that only young martial artists under the age of 30 will be allowed to participate. After all, those old fellows will not bother to participate in such a martial meet. Ding Yifun was extremely happy. Nie Tian's words were exactly what he wanted. He said excitedly, let's do as City Lord Nie said. Only young martial artists are allowed to participate in the martial meet, and then the top 100 will receive the rewards. Nie Tian nodded his head and smiled. He had only mentioned it slightly, because he vaguely remembered that the Martial Merchant Union's genius ranking only recorded young martial artists under the age of 30. Therefore, if he could use the Dragon Blood Martial Meet to see the various great geniuses of the southern mountain region, it would be very good. As for whether Nie Tian would participate in the martial meet, that would depend on when the martial meet would begin and how strong he was at that time. If the Dragon Blood Martial Meet started tomorrow, with Nie Tian's strength, wouldn't he be looking for trouble if he participated? Following that, Ding Yifun and Gu Yi discussed the details of the martial meet, how to register, how to reward, and argued fiercely. Nie Tian watched from the side and did not interrupt. In any case, he was not very interested in the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. After half an hour, some of the details of the martial meet were finally decided. Gu Yi and Ding Yifun decided that only the top 50 of the martial meet would receive the Dragon Bloodstone as a reward, and the top 100 would receive other valuable rewards. As for these other rewards, they would naturally be provided by Gu Yi and the Yuan Chamber of Commerce. Nie Tian did not care too much and directly nodded his head in agreement. However, the time of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet had not been decided yet. It depended on when the Dragon Bloodstone could be extracted. Brother Nie, young Master Ding, and I will bring the crypt spirits to the Tianluo Mountain later. Do you want to come along? Gu Yi suddenly said. Sure. Nie Tian nodded his head and smiled, happily agreeing. The crypt spirits had confirmed the location of the Dragon Bloodstone, so the ancient dragon soul was definitely not far from it. Everyone stood up and prepared to leave. Bang! Just at this time, the room's door was suddenly knocked open. A petite figure barged in and shouted, Teacher, is that guy called Nie Tian here? Nie Tian was stunned. Looking at the little girl in front of him, he frowned and said, Do I know you? Linglong, don't be rude. Gu Yi looked at Shui Linglong, who had suddenly barged in, and lightly reprimanded her. Then, slightly embarrassed, he smiled at Nie Tian and said, She's this old man's disciple, the little princess of the Water Crow Empire, Shui Linglong. So it's the Water Crow Empire's Princess Linglong. No wonder you're so beautiful. Ao Kiki Yuri giggled and casually praised. Ding Yifun swept a glance at her, but did not have any reaction. Shui Linglong's black, gem-like eyes flickered and swept a glance at everyone present. Finally, her gaze landed on Nie Tian, but she smiled embarrassedly. Her small mouth pouted, and her snow-white chin was raised. She was as proud as a white swan, and with a face full of arrogance, she said, You are Nie Tian? Not that great. You only have the strength of the second tier of the all-creations realm. You're not even as good as me. Gu Yi's face darkened, and he immediately looked at Nie Tian, afraid that the latter would be angry. Chapter 225. Nie Tian looked at the fiery little girl in front of him, smiled speechlessly, and said with curled lips, Are you Princess Shui Linglong? Not that great. Only rank 29 spiritual power, not even as good as me. The same tone, the same words, but coming out of Nie Tian's mouth, it was full of laughter. You can directly see my spiritual power? Shui Linglong's delicate face stiffened. The surprise in her heart was revealed on her face. When Gu Yi heard Nietian's words, he was also directly stunned, and when his divine sense swept past Nietian, the astonishment on his face suddenly doubled. 43rd rank! Gu Yi perceived Nietian's spiritual power and was immediately shocked to the extreme. Just now, Nietian easily said Shui Linglong's spiritual power, which was already enough to surprise Gu Yi. Because if a martial artist wanted to see through the other party's spiritual power, they had to be at least 10 ranks higher than the other party. Since Shui Linglong's psychic power was at the 29th level, and Nietian was able to easily see through it, it meant that his psychic power was above the 39th level. So Gu Yi perceived it for a bit, and this was not important, but it directly stunned him. Nietian's spiritual power was actually at rank 43. 43rd rank, my mother! Gu Yi cried out in his heart. 43rd rank spiritual power. This number itself was not terrible. Any 4th rank alchemist could reach this level. But this number appearing on a 16-year-old youth, it was shocking. Gu Yi knew that even Gu Qiulong, known as one of the 3 great evildoers of Sumi Ling capital, only had a spiritual power of rank 45. And Gu Qiulong was already 20 years old, and Nietian was only 16 years old. One had to know, Gu Qiulong was an evildoer-level genius on par with MOU, and could be said to be the peak genius of the 3,000 small worlds. But compared to Nietian, his talent was simply trash. The difference was not 1 or 2 points, but thousands of points. Zhang Yifeng was also very surprised. He had long guessed that Nietian's spiritual power was very strong, but when he confirmed this point, he was also shocked. Aoki Lily and the others did not know about mind power, so they were not too surprised. Nietian calmly glanced at Gu Yi and transmitted his voice, "Old Gu, don't tell anyone about me." Originally, Nietian's spiritual power was at level 42, but after last night's training, his strength had risen by a level, and his spiritual power had also risen by a level. With the existence of the primal chaos original coffin, 1 day of cultivation for Nietian was equivalent to 10 days of cultivation for other cultivators. Thus, his cultivation speed was naturally tremendous. Gu Yi hurriedly nodded his head and conveniently wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. The shock that Nietian brought him was too great. If such a person were to come to the Sumi spirit capital, those old monsters of the alchemist would probably go crazy. Little Ling Long, now you know that there's always a higher mountain, right? Gu Yi saw that Shui Linglong's small face had stiffened from the blow, so he poked the latter's small forehead and pretended to be angry. And Shui Linglong finally reacted, and her small head fiercely nodded a few times. Only now did she realize that this Nietian in front of her was really more monstrous than her. Since then, Shui Linglong no longer had the heart to compete with Nietian. Little girl, your mental power is already very good. Continue to work hard. I believe that you will definitely have some achievements in the alchemy Dao. At least, you will not be worse than your teacher. Nietian did not want to give Shui Linglong a heavy blow, so he said with a faint smile. Really? Shui Linglong's beautiful eyes flashed, and she asked with a serious expression. Of course it's true. Nietian stuck out his chest and said in a plain tone, I never lie. Nietian's words, of course, were not purely to comfort Shui Linglong. She was only 14 years old, and her mental power had reached level 29. This talent, even in the Heaven Realm's God domain, was considered outstanding. Shui Linglong's achievements in the future would be above Gu Yi. That was a matter of fact. Good. I will remember your words. If I cannot surpass teacher in the future, I will put it on your head. Shui Linglong nodded her small head and said with a serious expression, Put on my head? Nietian was speechless and could only bitterly smile. Enough, Linglong girl. Don't make trouble. We still have things to do. You go back first. Gu Yi did not want to waste any more time and directly said to Shui Linglong. Shui Linglong pouted her small mouth, suddenly pulled Gu Yi, and said coquettishly, Teacher, what are you going to do? Can you bring me along? We're going to do proper business. Why are you, a little girl, following us? Gu Yi said slightly angrily. Shui Linglong rolled her eyes and immediately pointed at Nye Tian and said, "He is only a few years older than me. Why can he go?" Nye Tian shook his head speechlessly and could only say, "Gu Yi, let her follow." "Many thanks." Not waiting for Gu Yi to speak, Shui Linglong thanked him first. "Sigh, I really don't know what to do with you." Gu Yi helplessly sighed, but his doting feelings were overflowing. Just now, when he heard Nye Tian say that Shui Linglong's future achievements would be above his, Gu Yi was not only not unhappy, but also very gratified. A teacher who did not want his disciple to surpass him was not a good teacher. After a moment, Tong Fu appeared with the crypt elf. Nye Tian looked at the two people and could not help but smile. An elf and a dwarf walking together, it was naturally full of laughter. Not to mention this elf and the dwarf were so compatible. "Big brother." Tong Fu walked over and first called out to Gu Yi. The crypt elf beside him was obviously a little afraid, not daring to look at the person beside him, and also subconsciously leaned against Tong Fu, seemingly wanting to seek protection. "It's okay. They're all good people. They will not hurt you," Tong Fu said softly. This was the first time he saw him so gentle. It was very rare. "She still did not speak?" Gu Yi asked. "No." Tong Fu helplessly shook his head. It turned out that ever since this crypt elf came to the Alchemist Guild, she did not speak a word, which made Gu Yi and Tong Fu very distressed. At this time, Nye Tian could not help but slightly shake his head, suddenly took a step forward and said, "My name is Nye Tian. What is your name?" When his voice fell, everyone looked at Nye Tian in astonishment. They completely did not know what Nye Tian was talking about. Nye Tian had just used the elven language. Of course, the others could not understand it. The crypt elf in front of them obviously had not come into contact with humans and did not understand the human language. Of course, it was impossible for her to speak. The cave elf jerked her head up and fixed her clear eyes on Nye Tian, thinking that she had run into one of her own. However, as soon as she saw Nye Tian's face, a disappointed expression appeared on her face, and she lowered her head again. Nye Tian did not give up, and once again said in the elven language, "You can rest assured, no one will hurt you here. I will give you a guarantee. If you help me determine the location of a stone mine, I will give you freedom, and will definitely send you back to your clansmen safely." When the crypt elf heard Nye Tian's words, she raised her head again, an unconcealable desire in her eyes, and finally said, "Is what you said true?" "This is my promise," Nye Tian said, and stretched out a fist in front of the crypt elf. Chapter 2:26. Nye Tian's action just now was how elves passed on trust. Only elves and those recognized by elves knew this method. If one person stretched out their fist, the other would stretch out their hand to hold their fist if they were willing to trust them. In Nye Tian's previous life, one of his 9 personal disciples was an elf, so not only did he know elven language, but he also knew many unique ways elves communicated. Now that the crypt elf had stretched out her hand to hold Nye Tian's fist, it meant that she was willing to trust Nye Tian. This was a very good start. The others looked at Nye Tian and the crypt elf in a daze, not knowing what had happened. "My name is Adele." The crypt elf released her hand and said shyly. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "Adele, a beautiful name. It means bright morning, right?" "Yes." Adele nodded happily and finally smiled. She didn't expect Nye Tian to even know the meaning of her name. Beside her, Tong Fu couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Mr. Nye, what were you saying to her just now? I don't understand. Can you teach me?" Nye Tian nodded slightly and said, "Her name is Adele, and we were talking in elven language just now. This is her first time coming into contact with humans, so she doesn't know how to speak human language." Elven language? Gu Yi and the others looked at each other and then looked at Nye Tian in shock. This guy was too abnormal. How could he know everything? He could even speak elven language so fluently. How could he let them live? Ding Yifan looked at Nye Tian with a hint of reverence in his eyes. He suddenly remembered the scene of him arguing with Nye Tian and immediately felt that he was a bit childish. Aoki Eureka also became very interested in Nye Tian, and a pair of charming eyes roamed around him. Tong Fu, on the other hand, looked at Nie Tian expectantly, wanting Nie Tian to teach him the elven language. Looking at this kid's appearance, he was quite interested in Adele. Old Gu, I promise to give Adele her freedom if she helps us find the Dragon Bloodstone. No problem, right? Nie Tian said to Gu Yi. No problem, of course not. Little brother, you can do whatever you want. Gu Yi chuckled. He had a lot of trust in Nie Tian. As long as he could obtain the Dragon Bloodstone, a mere crypt elf was nothing. He could even give it to Nie Tian. Following that, Aoki Eureka left the Alchemist Guild to make arrangements for the Dragon Blood Martial group. It was best to spread the news of the Dragon Blood Martial meet as soon as possible. Otherwise, if the news of the Dragon Bloodstone spread too quickly, it would be troublesome if someone tried to snatch it away. Nie Tian could tell that Aoki Lily's shrewdness was not inferior to her beauty in the slightest, so for her to arrange the Dragon Blood Martial meet was very reassuring. Nie Tian and the others went straight to Tian Luo Mountain. In Danwu City, it was still bustling. Everyone was discussing the matter of the Dragon Bloodstone, and it was obvious that many martial artists were already rushing to Tian Luo Mountain in groups, seemingly wanting to get a piece of the action. Entering Tian Luo City from Danwu City, there were obviously more martial artists on the streets, and most of them were not weak. There were at least essence spirit martial artists, and there were even figures of giant spirit martial artists. So many people want to go to Tian Luo Mountain. Looks like I have to collect more entrance fees. Nie Tian walked on the streets of Tian Luo City and said with a faint smile, Of course, of course. Gu Yi thought that Nie Tian was only joking, so he casually went along with it. After a while, the group left Tian Luo City and soon arrived at Tian Luo Mountain. Tian Luo Mountain. This was Nie Tian looking at the mountain forest in front of him, the corner of his mouth involuntarily curling up. He accidentally asked for a city from Lan Bingshan and did not expect to get such a big surprise. It was really not bad. Little brother Nya, you also sense the existence of the Dragon Bloodstone through the demonic fire, right? After entering Tian Luo Mountain, Gu Yi suddenly asked. The demonic fire was a secret between Nie Tian and Gu Yi. Of course, it could not be said openly. Demonic fire? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and then he understood something. No wonder Gu Yi could sense the Dragon Bloodstone. It was because he had merged with the Doomsday Flame's doppelganger, White Flame Lai Xian. Understanding this, Nie Tian once again concluded that the person behind the Wenqin Empire was the Doomsday Flame. However, Nie Tian did not sense the Dragon Bloodstone because the demonic fire in his body had already been devoured by the 9 extreme Chaos Beast. Therefore, he could not sense the Dragon Bloodstone, and the Doomsday Flame could not sense him. Nie Tian, seeing that Nie Tian was deep in thought and did not answer him, Gu Yi shouted. Nie Tian reacted and sent a voice transmission over, but he did not answer Gu Yi's question. Instead, he reminded, Old Gu, I think the secret of the Dragon Bloodstone was leaked by the Doomsday Flame, and he definitely knows of your existence. You have to be careful in the future. Doomsday Flame. Gu Yi pondered for a moment and sent a voice transmission. You don't have to worry for me. I don't believe that anyone would dare to attack me in the vicinity of Danwu City. You, on the other hand, must be careful. Gu Yi was not a fool. He naturally noticed Feng Lianqing's abnormal reaction, so he vaguely guessed that the Doomsday Flame's main body was already in Danwu City. Gu Yi had many experts around him, so he was naturally not worried that someone would dare to attack him. However, Nie Tian was different. He only had Qiu Shan by his side. Although he had some strength, if he encountered an expert like Feng Lianqing, it would be very troublesome. I'm fine. Nie Tian smiled faintly, very confident, because he knew that the Doomsday Flame could not sense his existence at all. Everyone continued walking forward. Gu Yi's figure suddenly paused, and he turned to look into the distance. Big brother, what's wrong? Tong Fu saw Gu Yi's strange expression and immediately became nervous. Tong Fu followed by Gu Yi's side, and of course, he also shouldered the responsibility of protecting the latter. However, Gu Yi smiled faintly and immediately shouted, Friend, you've already been exposed. Why don't you show yourself? Just as he said that someone would harm him, he immediately discovered the person who was secretly following him. The forest was dead silent at first, and no one responded. After a moment, a figure flashed out of the forest and landed on a big tree. Nietion raised his head and looked. The person who came was actually a young martial artist who looked less than 20 years old. His appearance was delicate and handsome, but his eyes were incomparably sinister, with unconcealable anger. "It's you." Ding Yifan saw the person's face clearly, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. Obviously, he knew the person who came. The person took a glance at Ding Yifan, then immediately swept his gaze around. When he saw Nietion, a hint of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. However, he finally suppressed his anger and cupped his hands to Gu Yi, saying, "Master Gu, this junior is Gong Feiyu from Richu Empire. I have no intention of offending you today. I'm just here to find someone and ask some questions." "Gong Feiyu." Gu Yi didn't react, but Shui Linglong, who was beside him, was surprised. Then, she cried out in pleasant surprise, "You're the 9th prince of Richu Empire, Gong Feiyu, ranked 9th on the Nanshan Domain Genius list." "That's right." Gong Feiyu nodded, appearing calm and composed. Chapter 227. Gong Feiyu, the 9th prince of the Sun Chu Empire, was an outstanding figure among the younger generation of the Nanshan region, a super genius ranked 9th on the Nanshan region genius list. His strength was even more terrifying than Ding Yifan and Aoki Baiha. He didn't come to Tianluo Mountain for the Dragon Bloodstone, but to look for Nietion. His goal was another person, Gong Sheng. Gong Sheng was the 7th prince of the Sun Chu Empire, and he was Gong Feiyu's biological brother. Although Gong Sheng and Gong Feiyu were brothers born from the same mother, their temperament and talents were worlds apart. Gong Feiyu absolutely crushed his elder brother, Gong Sheng, in every aspect. "You're here to look for me, right?" Nietion looked at Gong Feiyu and smiled faintly. Gong Feiyu was only 19 years old, but he was already at the 5th level of the giant spirit realm. No wonder he was ranked 9th on the genius list. Nietion deduced that Gong Feiyu was definitely stronger than Ding Yifan. Looking at his posture and footsteps, his spirit should be of the rare wind attribute. Hearing Nietion's words, Gu Yi and the others turned to look at him. Ding Yifan suddenly thought of something and exclaimed in his heart, "Nietion didn't really kill Gong Sheng, right? Although Gong Sheng is a profligate, he is still Gong Feiyu's biological brother. If he really died in Nietion's hands, things would be troublesome." Gong Feiyu's gaze fell on Nietion, and his expression suddenly turned cold. He said, "Nietion City Lord, I only have one question to ask you. Where's my brother, Gong Sheng? I killed him." Before Gong Feiyu could finish, he was interrupted by Nietion. Everyone looked at Nietion in surprise, as if they were saying, "Even if he was killed by you, there's no need to admit it so easily, right? You killed him." Gong Feiyu's expression instantly changed, and his aura collapsed. Gong Sheng was Gong Feiyu's brother. They grew up together and had a deep relationship. Although Gong Sheng was arrogant and despotic, he had always been a good brother to Gong Feiyu. Because of this, Gong Feiyu cared so much about Gong Sheng. Gong Sheng did not return last night, and even the 2 Imperial secret guards who were secretly protecting him had disappeared. Gong Feiyu was prepared for the worst before he came, but when he heard the news of Gong Sheng's death, he was still heartbroken. Everyone looked at Gong Feiyu and knew that this matter was troublesome. Nietion directly admitted that he had killed Gong Sheng. The enmity between him and Gong Feiyu was irreconcilable. "Nietion, why did you kill him?" Suddenly, Gong Feiyu roared furiously and asked sternly. Nietion was still calm, but he became slightly more serious. He said indifferently, "He wanted to hurt my friend, and he followed me to Heaven Luo City, so I killed him." Not only did Gong Sheng chase after Tang Yu, but he also tried to snatch the Violet Sun Pill Cauldron and Wild World defying blade art from Nietion's hands. He even brought a group of young masters to chase after him to Heaven Luo City. He was simply courting death. Nietion had no reason not to kill him. Gong Feiyu, when Castellania and Gong Sheng clashed, I was at the scene. It was indeed Gong Sheng who provoked him first, but I didn't expect him to chase after him to Heaven Luo City. This matter has nothing to do with Castellan Ye. Seeing that Gong Feiyu was about to go crazy, Ding Yifan quickly took a step forward and tried to explain, but he was interrupted by Gong Feiyu. Ding Yifan had just reacted. That day, he had already reminded Nie Tian that Gong Sheng could not be killed casually. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would be so daring and still killed him? In fact, it was Gong Sheng's fault for chasing after him to Heaven Luo City. That was Nie Tian's doorstep. How could he be so presumptuous? If such a thing happened to Ding Yifan, he would also kill Gong Sheng. A bunch of nonsense. Gong Feiyu was on the verge of going crazy. He roared angrily and stared at Nie Tian with his bloodshot eyes. His roar sounded out. Nie Tian, I don't care why you killed him, but he is my brother, and you must pay with your life today. Nie Tianling sneered and remained calm. He said solemnly, So what if he is your brother? Do I have to let him do as he pleases just because he wants to harm the people around me? In your eyes, only your brother is human, and everyone else is a pig or a dog. Nie Tian followed a principle when he did things. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will return the favor 100-fold. Even if he killed Gong Sheng and attracted the trouble of Gong Feiyu, Nie Tian did not regret it at all. In his previous life, he had seen too many tragedies. This was a world where strength was respected, and, at the same time, it was a cruel world. The biggest rule was the fist of the strong. In his previous life, Nie Tian often said to the warriors under his command, The enemy will not stop because of your tolerance, and your family will suffer because of your weakness. If Nie Tian was given another chance, he would still kill Gong Sheng without hesitation. I don't care so much. Gong Feiyu was completely crazy, and his hoarse voice rolled out from his throat. The killing intent in his body rose sharply, almost condensing into a substance, and suddenly pressed down on Nie Tian. Mr. Qiushan suddenly became nervous and wanted to step forward, but he was stopped by Nie Tian. Qiushan, step back. Nie Tian knew that Qiushan was no match for Gong Feiyu at that moment. If he were to attack, he would only become cannon fodder. Gong Feiyu's aura was very strong, and this aura alone gave Nie Tian a strong sense of oppression. This kind of oppression was something that Nie Tian had not felt even when he was fighting against the corpse demon body of the Bloodbat sect master, Gao Jin. At that moment, Nie Tian was prepared to use his star soul if Gong Feiyu dared to take another step forward. Nie Tian only had one star soul, the Red Dragon Soul. However, the Red Dragon Soul was a rank 2 star soul. Once he used it, even if he could not kill Gong Feiyu instantly, he would definitely be severely injured. As long as Gong Feiyu was severely injured, Nie Tian would definitely not let him leave this place alive. Life and death were in the hands of Gong Feiyu. At that moment, Gong Feiyu was overwhelmed by hatred and could not care so much. The aura in his body continued to rise, and even the power of heaven and earth around him seemed to change slightly. Just as he was about to attack, two figures appeared in front of Nie Tian at almost the same time. They were Tong Fu and Ding Yifan. Ding Yifan, you want to become my enemy because of this person? Gong Feiyu's stern gaze swept past Ding Yifan as he spoke with a gloomy face. Gong Feiyu, City Lord Nye is my friend. Gong Sheng's death is his own fault, and he cannot blame anyone else. If you want to kill someone in front of me, don't even think about it. Ding Yifan took another step forward fearlessly. Even though he knew that he was no match for Gong Feiyu, it would not be easy for Gong Feiyu to defeat him. Nie Tian glanced at Ding Yifan. He was a little surprised that Ding Yifan would step forward to block the attack for him. Chapter 228. Gong Feiyu was enraged. He turned to Tong Fu with a cold gaze and smiled contemptuously. Who do you think you are? You're just a dwarf from an inferior race. How dare you speak to this prince like this? Gong Feiyu had probably stayed in the Sun Empire for too long. He didn't know that Tong Fu was Gu Yi's brother and even dared to call him an inferior race. Oh no! Gu Yi's face changed when he heard the term inferior race from Gong Feiyu's mouth. His heart sank. Tong Fu hated it the most when others called the dwarf race an inferior race. This was his reverse scale. Anyone who touched it would die. In Tong Fu's heart, the dwarf race was the noblest race in the world. Ah! Little bastard, you asked for it. This prince will tear you apart. The next moment, Tong Fu flew into a rage. A giant black hammer appeared in his hand. It was even bigger than his body. When the giant black hammer appeared, the power of heaven and earth suddenly changed. It was as if the space within dozens of meters was distorted. Everyone retreat. Nietian felt something was wrong. He roared and stomped on the ground, retreating dozens of meters. What a terrifying aura! Ding Yifan also felt something was wrong. He exclaimed and retreated quickly. In an instant, everyone retreated, maintaining a distance of dozens of meters from Tong Fu. Nietian saw the giant black hammer in Tong Fu's hand. His face stiffened and he exclaimed, "The Hammer of Destruction!" The Hammer of Destruction was a legendary grade spirit with an 8th grade spirit aptitude. A 7th grade spirit was mythical grade, an 8th grade spirit was legendary grade, and a 9th grade spirit was supreme grade. Among martial artists, a 5th or 6th grade spirit aptitude was a rare existence. Rank 7 primordial spirits were monstrous geniuses. Rank 8 and 9 primordial spirits were legendary existences. So far, among all the martial artists Nietian had met, Emo Rushi's 9 Heavens Divine Phoenix Spirit was undoubtedly the most terrifying. It was a 9th grade Supreme Grade Spirit. Next was MOU, one of the 3 monsters of Su-Mi Spirit Capital. He was a 7th grade, Mythical Grade Spirit. As for Jean de Bao's Demon God Blood Scroll Origin Spirit, Neyuro's Rainbow Demon Rabbit Origin Spirit, and Teng Yuyu's 9-Winged Dragon Crow Origin Spirit, Nietian could not determine their aptitudes. However, Nietian was able to determine the grade and aptitude of Tong Fu's Destruction Hammer Elemental Spirit. Because the original spirit of Tong Liao, one of his 9 great disciples, was also the Hammer of Destruction. More importantly, Nietian also knew that the Hammer of Destruction was a bloodline spirit that could be inherited through the bloodline. Nietian suddenly realized that it wasn't a coincidence that Tong Fu and Tong Liao had the same surname. Without a doubt, Tong Fu was Tong Liao's descendant. Moreover, judging from his age, Tong Fu should be Tong Liao's son. Tong Fu should be 98 years old this year, which meant that he was born 2 years after Nietian disappeared from the Heaven Realm. Tong Liao, why did your son appear in the 3,000 small worlds? What happened after I died? Nietian's heart was in turmoil. He could naturally guess that after Heavenly Emperor Dainite killed him, he would definitely deal with his 9 great disciples. Nietian felt that with his 9 great disciple strength, they should be able to protect themselves. But now, Tong Liao's son appeared in the 3,000 small worlds. This made Nietian have a pessimistic guess in his heart. Tong Liao must have met with an accident. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to abandon his son. Nietian glanced at Gu Yi at this time and said in his heart, "When there's time, I must ask Gu Yi clearly about Tong Fu's background." At this time, Nietian did not have time to think too much. He could only focus on the battle in front of him first. Tong Fu had the strength of a 9th-level giant spirit. Moreover, his primordial spirit was the legendary supreme overlord primordial spirit, the Hammer of Destruction. Therefore, Nietian was not worried about him in the slightest. On the other hand, whether or not Gong Feiyu could withstand Tong Fu's hammer was a question mark. The power of the Hammer of Destruction was extraordinary. Even when Nietian was guiding Tong Liao in his previous life, he had to be very careful. Inferior race. Why would I be afraid of you? Although he felt that Tong Fu's aura was very powerful, Gong Feiyu obviously would not retreat. With a cold shout, the giant spirit true body appeared behind him. It was actually a scarlet giant ant with 2 pairs of golden wings on its back. The ardent sun-flying ant was Gong Feiyu's primordial spirit. Nietian was slightly stunned and said in his heart, Gong Feiyu is indeed powerful. His primordial spirit not only has the wind attribute, but it also seems to have the fire attribute. No wonder he is ranked 9th on the Nanshan region genius roll. Dual attribute primordial spirits were very rare, 1 in a million. Gong Feiyu's ardent sun-flying ant had the wind and fire attributes. However, his wind and fire attributes were much weaker than Nie Yuro's flowing color charming rabbit's light and wind attributes. Nie Yuro's light attribute alone was enough to be proud of everyone. Adding on the wind attribute was simply a blow to people's hearts. You're courting death. Tong Fu's hair stood up in anger. The hair on his face stood up, and he was completely like a wild beast. He raised the hammer of destruction with both hands and smashed it on the ground. Rumble! There was a loud sound, and the surrounding ground shook violently. In the next moment, the ground collapsed. With the hammer of destruction as the center, the ground within 100 meters collapsed, and a shockwave that was visible to the naked eye vibrated. Be careful! Nie Tian immediately sensed the danger. He grabbed Adele, who was beside him, and the proud sword heaven wings appeared on his back. With a flap of the wings, his figure suddenly retreated. At the same time, the others also retreated. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the shockwave affected the huge trees, and they were all broken. Gong Feiyu felt the terrifying air wave pressing towards him and wanted to counterattack. However, the ardent sun-flying ant was simply like a toy, and it couldn't resist the power of the hammer of destruction at all. Immediately, it flew out like a kite with a broken string. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief, but when they saw the scene in front of them, they all gasped. As far as the eye could see, it was a mess. Thick trees fell to the ground in disorder. Rocks flew everywhere, and dust filled the sky. The scene in front of them was like the scene of the end of the world. The hammer of destruction had the power to destroy heaven and earth. Little bastard, die for me. At that moment, Tong Fu took a step and leaped to a height of 100 meters. The hammer of destruction actually made him stand in the air. 1,000 meters away, in a deep pit, Gong Feiyu was covered in blood. He was in a sorry state and couldn't even stand up. One hammer. It was just one hammer, a simple hammer, and it had beaten the 9th genius on the genius list to the point that he couldn't get up. However, such power was displayed without Tong Fu using the giant spirit true body. If he had used the giant spirit true body directly, Gong Feiyu would have been dead by now. Since Gong Feiyu wasn't dead, Tong Fu naturally wouldn't stop. With a roar, the hammer of destruction suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it became a giant hammer that was 100 meters tall. Giant spirit true body. Tong Fu was going to use the hammer of destruction's giant spirit true body. Upon seeing this, everyone's expressions froze. If the hammer were to smash down, Gong Feiyu would probably die without a trace. Fu, stop! Suddenly, Gu Yi seemed to have thought of something and shouted anxiously. However, it was too late. Chapter 229. Tong Fu looked down from above and smashed down with the hammer of destruction. The rolling aura seemed to collapse the sky. Gong Feiyu, who had been extremely arrogant, showed an unconcealable despair in his eyes. In his pupils, the shadow of the hammer of destruction was getting closer and closer. The whistling sound of the wind was like a death knell from hell, becoming more and more urgent. Gong Feiyu would never have dreamed that he, the 9th genius of the Nanshan region's genius ranking, would be like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in front of a dwarf. He couldn't even take a single blow from the dwarf. At this moment, everyone felt their hearts jump to their throats. Ding Yifan knew that Gong Feiyu was the number one of the younger generation of the Dawn Imperial family. If he really died at the hands of Tong Fu, the Dawn Empire would definitely not let it go. The Dawn Imperial family didn't care about Gong Sheng at all. At most, they would lose face. But Gong Feiyu was different. He was considered the best successor of the Dawn Imperial family. His identity and status were far beyond Gong Sheng's. Gu Yi's expression was extremely nervous, and his old face was full of sweat. Just as Tong Fu's hammer of destruction was about to land, a sudden change occurred at the critical moment. How dare you, I stopped. Just as the fatal blow of the hammer of destruction was about to fall, a vigorous and indifferent old voice sounded. In the next moment, A gray-robed figure appeared in the distant sky. The yuan energy around him kept on surging, and a terrifying aura spread out over 100 meters away. The space around him seemed to have been distorted, and one could vaguely see the distortion of space. It surrounded him, forming a spherical barrier with a radius of 100 meters. Although they were hundreds of meters away, everyone felt that the gray-robed figure emitted an unparalleled aura that was several times more terrifying than Tong Fu's. What a powerful aura! Ding Yifan had never seen such a tyrannical expert. His face was as white as paper, and he said in a trembling voice, "Qiu Shan, Zhang Yifeng," and the others were also frightened. True energy realm expert. Nie Tian looked at the gray-robed figure that suddenly appeared in the sky and couldn't help but frown. Damn, the old monster of the Gong family is out. Gu Yi was even more frightened and screamed. Tong Fu also felt the powerful pressure from the gray-robed figure, but he didn't care. The hammer of destruction smashed down even more violently. Madman, since I've already spoken, why are you still not stopping? You are simply courting death. Seeing Tong Fu's actions, the gray-robed old man was immediately enraged. He raised his arm and slapped down with his palm. Boom! In the void, a giant hand appeared, carrying an earth-shattering might as it blasted towards Tong Fu. The giant hand was like the rolling waves of a tsunami. It actually carried the power of heaven and earth around it and attacked Tong Fu at an extremely fast speed. Bang! The giant hand finally arrived just before the hammer of destruction fell, and the most violent collision erupted in the air. However, the hammer of destruction's aura was clearly too weak, and it was sent flying by the giant palm. Tong Fu let out a miserable howl, and his giant spirit true body disappeared. Like a shot put, he smashed straight into the ground. Tong Fu's all-out attack using the hammer of destruction and the giant spirit true body was actually unable to contend against the gray-robed old man's casual palm strike. The scene in front of them made Ding Yifan, Qiu Shan, and the others dumbfounded. Tong Fu's strength was already very terrifying, and he could crush Gong Feiyu with a casual strike of his hammer. However, the gray-robed old man defeated Tong Fu like a strong man beating a 3-year-old child. How terrifying would his strength be? Madman, how dare you hurt my Gong family's people? This is unforgivable. The gray-robed old man did not stop. Suddenly, he grabbed the void with his palm, and an invisible force wrapped around Tong Fu, who was still falling in midair. Suddenly, Tong Fu felt that his whole body was being squeezed by a huge force, as if he was going to be crushed in the next moment. His facial features were distorted, and his body was being squeezed until it was bloody. At this moment, if no one stopped the gray-robed old man, Tong Fu would definitely die tragically on the spot. Fu! Nie Tian suddenly remembered Tong Fu's identity. His body shook, and the proud sword divine wings appeared on his back, and he leaped 100 meters into the air. Tong Fu was the son of Tong Liao, which meant that he was Nie Tian's family. How could he watch him die tragically? War God's 3 seals, the highest seal, soul-extinguishing heavenly seal. High in the air, Nie Tian did not hesitate at all. He gathered the power of heaven and earth and used his strongest move, soul-extinguishing heavenly seal. Nie Tian could already see that the gray-robed old man was a true energy realm expert. Even if he used the second-rank astral soul of the red dragon, it would not hurt the old man at all. At this moment, only the soul-extinguishing heavenly seal could give him chance. Nie Tian's strongest move now was the 3 seals of the war god. The 3 seals of the war god: human flowing seal, earth annihilation seal, soul extinguishing heavenly seal. 3 seals, each stronger than the last. Nie Tian used the flowing human seal to defeat Ba Ziyang when he was only at the origin vein realm. Nie Tian used the earth annihilation seal to defeat Tang Yuyu when he was at the origin spirit realm. Now, he was going to use the soul-extinguishing heavenly seal to deal with the gray-robed old man when he was at the second stage of manifestation realm. Seeing Nie Tian's crazy actions, Ding Yifun's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He screamed in his mind, "Is Nie Tian crazy?" The gray-robed old man was a super expert who could kill Tong Fu with one palm strike. Nie Tian was only at the second stage of manifestation realm. Wasn't he just courting death? However, Nie Tian couldn't care less at this moment. No matter what, he couldn't watch Tong Fu die. The power of heaven and earth around Nie Tian grew thicker and thicker. He had to endure more power of heaven and earth. Only then could he slightly display the power of the soul-extinguishing heavenly seal. The gray-robed old man looked coldly at Nie Tian and sneered. A mere second stage of manifestation realm ant. Even if you borrow the power of heaven and earth, don't think of harming I in the slightest. I will definitely kill this dwarf. No one can stop him. Gong Lingy. Just as the gray-robed old man finished speaking, an angry voice suddenly rang out. Gong Lingy was the gray-robed old man's name. He was the ancestor of the Gong family of the Dawn Imperial family, and hadn't appeared for nearly 100 years. Hearing this voice, Gong Lingy was suddenly stunned. In the blink of an eye, he actually saw a familiar figure, Gu Yi. Grandmaster Gu. Gong Lingy recognized Gu Yi and was stunned. Gong Lingy, if you dare to kill him, I will fight to the death with the Dawn Imperial family. Gu Yi was extremely angry as he pointed at Gong Lingy and shouted. Gong Lingy frowned and immediately let go of his hand. At this moment, Nie Tian saw Gong Lingy let go of his hand, and the aura around his body immediately dispersed. The wings on his back shook, and his figure flashed as he held Tong Fu in his arms. Just now, Gu Yi was stunned, so he didn't immediately react. Otherwise, he would have jumped out long ago, and there would be no need for Nie Tian to make a move. Gong Lingy clearly recognized Gu Yi and knew his identity, so he was very afraid of him. He frowned and said, Grandmaster Gu, you know this dwarf? At this moment, Nie Tian landed beside Gu Yi with Tong Fu in his arms. Chapter 230. Tong Fu was severely injured and Gu Yi, the red-robed elder of the Apothecary Guild, actually burst into tears in front of everyone. Clearly, they shared a deep relationship. Master Gu. In midair, when Gong Lingy saw Gu Yi's reaction, he immediately knew that Gu Yi's relationship with Tong Fu was not ordinary, and a wisp of worry couldn't help but flash past his face as he shouted out with a trembling voice. Gong Lingy, as the ancestor of the early Sun Imperial family's Gong family, was indeed very powerful, but even so he still did not dare to offend Gu Yi. Gu Yi was a red-robed elder of the Apothecary Guild. Just this identity alone was something that even the emperor of a first-rate empire could not compare to. Not to mention that the Empire of Japan was only a second-rate empire. Just now, Gong Lingy was too enraged and simply did not detect the ancient will's existence. He had the intention to kill Gong Feiyu when he saw someone trying to kill him. If he knew about the relationship between Tong Fu and Gu Yi, even if Tong Fu really killed Gong Feiyu, he would have to think twice before deciding whether to take action. Sensing that Tong Fu's aura was not weak, Gu Yi quickly fed the latter several spirit pills. Nie Tian also heaved a sigh of relief and said, Old Gu, his primordial spirit is severely injured, but his life is not in danger. Dwarves are born with strong vitality, so they will definitely be fine. The dwarf race had the strongest vitality among all the races. In this aspect, even the demonic humans couldn't compare. As long as Tong Fu didn't die, he would quickly recover. Gu Yi's expression eased slightly. He suddenly turned around and looked at Gong Lingy in the air, cursing angrily. Gong Lingy, F***CK your mother. If anything happens to my brother, I'll bury the entire Dawn Imperial family with him. At this moment, Gu Yi had completely lost all sense of reason. How was he still the slightest bit of an alchemy grandmaster? Gong Lingy was scolded in public, his old face flushed red, but he didn't dare to show the slightest disrespect and could only agree with an embarrassed expression. Gu Yi's status was too high, and he couldn't afford to offend him. Gong Lingy also let out a long sigh of relief in his heart, rejoicing that he didn't kill Tong Fu. If Tong Fu were to die today, the empire of Sun Chu would be doomed. A few decades ago, there was a large sect in the southern mountain region that was comparable to a first-rate empire. However, because a disciple of the sect killed a yellow-robed elder of the Alchemist Association, the sect was annihilated overnight, directly disappearing from the 3,000 small worlds. Furthermore, he had only killed a yellow-robed elder. If he were to infuriate the red-robed elder, the Sun Chu Empire would be in deep trouble. Nie Tian looked at Gu Yi's enraged face, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. He thought to himself, this old fellow, when he's angry, he's quite cute. Gu Yi went forward and carefully sensed Tong Fu's condition, and only after he was certain that the latter's life was not in danger did his expression finally ease up. At this moment, Gong Lingyi had already picked up the unconscious Gong Feiyu, bowed and shouted, Master Gu, today's matter was a moment of rashness on my part. If I have offended you in any way, I hope Master Gu is magnanimous enough to forgive me. In the future, I will definitely pay you a visit to apologize. I still have matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. The matter that Gong Lingyi was talking about was, of course, Gong Feiyu, who was in his arms. Gong Feiyu's condition was not very good either, and he seemed to be in a worse state than Tong Fu. Gu Yi had a look of disgust as he waved his hand and said, Bring your son of a B** tch in scram. Farewell. Gong Lingyi's old face turned green and red as he said respectfully, Wait. Gong Lingyi had just turned around when Gu Yi suddenly thought of something and shouted, What other instructions does Master Gu have? Even though he was unwilling in his heart, Gong Lingyi was still respectful. Gu Yi said huffily, Tell the son of a B** tch in your arms not to find trouble with City Lord Nye anymore. Gong Sheng's matter was brought upon by himself, and he can't blame anyone else. Yes. Gong Lingyi nodded his head in agreement, not daring to have the slightest bit of disobedience. In his heart, he only cared about Gong Feiyu. As for whatever Gong Sheng, he had never even heard of this name before. Scram! Gu Yi waved his hand, not giving Gong Lingyi any face at all. Farewell. Gong Lingyi squeezed out an ugly smile on his old face, and his figure flashed, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Looking at the direction in which Gong Lingyi disappeared, Nie Tian sighed in his heart. A level 9 true element martial artist is still strong. Gong Lingyi's strength was precisely at level 9 true element, and he was much weaker than the Mo family's elder, Mo Feng, whom Nie Tian met. Mo Feng was a genuine spirit wheel expert, and Mo Feng was only an outer sanctum elder of the Mo family. A mere outer sanctum elder was able to crush a pinnacle expert from second-rate empire. From this, one could see the strength and foundation of the 4 major families. However, even if Gong Lingyi only had the strength of level 9 true element, if Nie Tian really used the soul-severing heavenly seal just now, he might not be able to defeat the other party. The soul-severing heavenly seal was indeed heaven-defying, but Nie Tian's strength was too weak, and he was completely unable to unleash the power of the heavenly seal. Gong Lingyi's strength of level 9 true element was a full realm higher than Tong Fu's. When a martial artist reached the later stages, the difference of 1 realm strength would be very obvious, not to mention the difference of 1 realm. Therefore, it was not strange that Gong Lingyi had the strength to crush Tong Fu. And the reason why Tong Fu could send Gong Feiyu flying with 1 hammer was not only because of the tyranny of the Hammer of Destruction, but also because his strength was 4 levels higher than Gong Feiyu. Strength, it's still strength. I must increase my strength as soon as possible. Nie Tian sighed in his heart. After this incident in front of him, Nie Tian felt the urgency of increasing his strength even more. If his strength was strong enough, there would be no need for Tong Fu to make a move, and he would not allow Gong Lingyi to be so arrogant. In the end, it was still his strength being too weak. The reason why Gong Lingyi was so fearful of Gu Yi was not because he was afraid of Gu Yi himself, but because he was afraid of the power behind him. Big brother. Gong Lingyi had just left not long when Tong Fu opened his eyes. Even though his complexion was still pale, he could already walk on his own. Just now, Tong Fu nearly died, but he recovered in a moment. The vitality of the dwarf race was indeed formidable. Nie Tian did not directly inquire about Tong Fu's background. He reckoned that Tong Fu himself did not know about this matter either. It was better to find a suitable time to ask Gu Yi. "Ah Fu, are you all right?" Gu Yi looked at Tong Fu and asked nervously. Tong Fu stretched his body a little. Instantly, his entire body emitted cracking sounds, and those twisted bones were actually forcibly snapped back to their original positions in an instant. "Big brother, who was that old fart just now? So goddamn ruthless." This great lord's old life almost died in his hands. Tong Fu forcefully endured the intense pain all over his body and chuckled. His gaze had a hint of arrogance. "Who cares about that old fart? Brother, you're all right. Big brother can rest assured." Gui saw that Tong Fu's condition was pretty good, and his heart calmed down quite a bit. The dwarf race's formidable vitality was closely related to their bodies. Although a dwarf was far from being as tall as a human, the weight of an adult dwarf was even higher than that of an adult human. Compared to other races, dwarves' bones and muscles were denser, and their ability to withstand blows was stronger. Even the speed at which they absorbed the medicinal effects of spirit pills was much faster than humans. It was precisely because of this that Tong Fu could recover very quickly. Chapter 231. When the others saw that Tong Fu had almost recovered in the blink of an eye, the shock in their hearts was revealed on their faces, and the way they looked at Tong Fu changed. Especially Ding Yifan. He had always thought that Tong Fu's strength wasn't much, and he didn't understand why Gu Yi would be so close to a dwarf. After witnessing the scene of Tong Fu defeating Gong Feiyu, Ding Yifan knew that he, the 11th genius of the Southern Mountain region's genius ranking, couldn't even block one hammer strike from Tong Fu. As for Nie Tian, just his courage in confronting Gong Lingyi was worthy of Ding Yifan's admiration. Ding Yifan felt very strange. Just now, he saw Nie Tian's serious look, as if he really had a chance to fight with Gong Lingyi. Could it be that he really had that kind of strength? One had to know that Gong Lingyi had the strength of the 9th level of true essence, while Nie Tian only had the strength of the 2nd level of Wanxiang. The two were almost 3 levels apart. Such a gap in strength couldn't even be described as the difference between heaven and earth, the difference between clouds and mud. But Nie Tian's aura, just now, was obviously very strong, and he didn't fear Gong Lingyi at all. Could it be that Nie Tian really has unfathomable strength? For the first time, Ding Yifan felt a trace of fear towards Nie Tian. Previously, Ding Yifan's attitude towards Nie Tian had changed a lot, and he even had some reverence, but he didn't think that Nie Tian had the strength to fight with him. But after what happened just now, Ding Yifan felt that Nie Tian's true strength was far above his estimation. Seeing that Tong Fu was fine, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. "Ah Fu, thank you just now." Nie Tian smiled faintly and sincerely thanked him. Although he already knew Tong Fu's identity, it was still necessary to thank him. Tong Fu chuckled and suddenly looked at Adele at the side, saying, "Mr. Nie, you can teach me the elf language later." Nie Tian was speechless. It seemed that Tong Fu really wanted to make a move on Adele. A dwarf and an elf. If these two were together, it would be a bit strange. "Mr. Nie Tian." At this moment, Adele seemed to have discovered something. Her small face changed, and then she was pleasantly surprised. "Adele, what did you find?" Nie Tian frowned slightly, and his divine sense enveloped her. "Yeah." The next moment, the 9-extremity chaos beast, who had been sleeping and cultivating in the chaos origin coffin, suddenly opened its eyes. It seemed to have sensed something that shocked it. Adele suddenly ran forward and arrived in front of the 100-meter crater that Tong Fu had just smashed with his hammer. She looked over in surprise, her face revealing a horrified expression. The others quickly followed. Everyone looked at the huge pit in front of them, and a look of horror appeared on their faces. The huge pit in front of him was 100 meters wide and dozens of meters deep. This was the power of Tong Fu's hammer, just now, and it was under the condition that he did not use the giant spirit true body. At this moment, the giant pit was emitting boiling hot air, and the air above appeared to be in a dense state under the high temperature. If one looked closely, they would notice that there was a faint red halo circulating in the air. It was an extremely strange sight. Mr. Nietion, this is the place. Adele looked at Nietion beside her and pointed to the huge pit. The stone that you want is below. Indeed, Nietion's expression changed. He could not help but laugh. It really is the aura of the dragon bloodstone. Damn, it really is the dragon bloodstone. The demonic fire in Guyi's body was unusually active. He also reacted in an instant. The dragon bloodstone was below his feet. The others were equally shocked. Who would have thought that a casual blow from Tong Fu would hit the dragon bloodstone so coincidentally? Yeah, yeah, yeah. At the same time, Little Nine, who was in the Chaos Origin coffin, seemed to be even more excited. It actually jumped up and down happily, its mouth constantly making ya sounds. Nietion frowned. He did not know why this little fellow was so excited, nor did he know what Little Nine was talking about. Yeah. At this time, Little Nine was also very anxious. Suddenly, a ray of light surged out of its body. That ray of light was like a brush. It spun in the air, and a lifelike little dragon appeared. Little Nine, you are saying that there is a dragon soul under this huge pit. Little Nine had already expressed it to this extent. No matter how stupid Nietion was, he understood what was going on. He was shocked and stunned. Yeah. Inside the Chaos Origin coffin, the little Chaos Beast's huge head was nodding furiously. It looked very happy. Nietion, however, was stunned for a full 3 to 4 seconds before he could react. Although he had already known that there would be an ancient dragon soul near the dragon bloodstone, when he confirmed it for himself, Nietion could not hide his shock. Brother Nya, are you all right? Guki saw that Nietion was stunned for a long time. He could not help but laugh and ask. Of course, he did not know that Nietion had just been communicating with the 9th level Chaos Beast. He thought that Nietion was too excited to see the Dragon Bloodstone. I'm fine. Nietion reacted and smiled slightly. Iya. A woo. At this time, Little Nine made a new move. His 2 little claws waved about, and his mouth made a big eating action. He directly ate the little light dragon in front of him. Nietion immediately realized what she was talking about. Are you saying that dragon souls are delicious? Yeah. Little Nine's large head nodded as he flew up. The wings on his back unfurled, and he did a somersault in the air. He was about to die from happiness. Nietion was completely speechless. In this fellow's eyes, the mighty ancient dragon soul could only be described with one word: delicious. The ancient divine dragon was a supreme existence that surpassed the 9th rank spirit beasts. Therefore, the combat power of the ancient dragon soul was definitely very strong. Even without a physical body, it was at least comparable to a true energy realm or even a spirit wheel realm martial artist. However, the 9th level Chaos Beast was a heaven-devouring soul. It was understandable for it to say that dragon souls were delicious. Little Nine had already swallowed the scarlet flame-burning tongue, but this was evidently not enough to satisfy its appetite. Now that it sensed the existence of the ancient dragon soul, it immediately became impatient. But no matter how impatient it was, it had to wait obediently. The ancient dragon soul was not that easy to obtain. Nietion had to plan slowly. He guessed that the ancient dragon soul must be hiding somewhere underground. Because the ancient dragon soul did not have a physical body, it was definitely not that easy to find it. Currently, the most important thing for Nietion was not the ancient dragon soul, but the dragon bloodstone in front of him. When the dragon bloodstone was extracted, Nietion could use the dragon bloodstone to crazily increase his strength. Once he was strong enough, it would be much easier for him to meet the ancient dragon soul. Little fellow, the ancient dragon soul is delicious, but you still have to wait. Good things are not so easy to obtain. Nietion comforted Little Nine so that it would not be so excited. Iya. Little Nine understood Nietion's meaning, pouting her lips. Although she was extremely unwilling in her heart, she still obediently ran off to cultivate. Nietian heaved a sigh of relief and thought to himself, this little fellow has been cultivating for such a long time. I guess it should have some strength by now. If it does not have strength and only thinks about eating, then it will be a dog. Until now, the 9th level Chaos Beast had not displayed any strength. Chapter 232. Nietian looked at the huge pit in front of him, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. It was now confirmed that the Dragon Bloodstone mine was under the huge pit. He just didn't know how many Dragon Bloodstones there were. After a moment of pondering, Nietian turned to Adele and asked, Adele, can you sense the specific location and size of the mineral veins? Crypt elves were born with an extremely strong sense of all kinds of ores. Even some ores they had never seen before, they could still sense their location and size. Adele nodded and grabbed something in the air with her wide palm. She then sniffed it a few times and said, the mine is 200 meters underground. There is underground lava in it, and there are red stones in the lava. That is the Dragon Bloodstone that Sir wants, right? Yes. Nietian smiled faintly. The biggest characteristic of the Dragon Bloodstone was that it was blood red in color. It was somewhat similar to the Chicken Bloodstone, but it was much larger than the Chicken Bloodstone. Each Dragon Bloodstone weighed thousands of pounds. The Dragon Bloodstone was formed when the dragon aura and blood essence of the divine dragon penetrated deep into the huge rock. The dragon aura and blood essence would choose relatively large and hard rocks as the fusion stone. Therefore, the Dragon Bloodstone could not be destroyed after hundreds of thousands of years. Adele continued, the Dragon Bloodstone mine is about 1,000 meters long and 100 meters wide. The ore layer is tens of meters deep. The entire mine is filled with Dragon Bloodstones. Even Adele couldn't help but be surprised at the end. So many. Nietian was pleasantly surprised. He thought to himself, could it be that more than one divine dragon has fallen here? If this is the place where several divine dragons have fallen, doesn't that mean that there is more than one dragon soul here? Thinking of this, Nietian's face was full of surprise. But it could also be an even stronger divine dragon. Among the dragon clan, the strongest should be the golden dragon. It was said that an adult golden dragon's body was thousands of meters long, which was very compatible with the underground Dragon Bloodstone mine. Very good. Thank you for your hard work. Nietian didn't think so much for the time being. He smiled faintly at Adele and immediately told Gu Yi, Ding Yifun, and the rest about the situation of the Dragon Bloodstone mine. Damn, we've struck it rich this time. Gu Yi also did not expect the Dragon Bloodstone vein to be so huge and was grinning from ear to ear. Master Gu, City Lord Nya, I will inform my sister and ask her to send people to guard this place. A few days later, the mining team from the Yuan Chamber of Commerce will arrive. At that time, we can directly start mining the Dragon Bloodstone mineral vein, Ding Yifun said excitedly. The elder sister he was referring to was, of course, Aoki Lily. Aokiki Lily was the adopted daughter of the president of the Yuan Chamber of Commerce, so Ding Yifun addressed her as his elder sister. At this time, Aoki Lily should have already spread the news of the Dragon Blood Martial Group. The Yuan Chamber of Commerce had branches in the entire Nanshan region, so it was very easy for them to spread the news. Before long, there would be large batches of martial artists flooding into Danwu City and Heavenluo City. Young Master Ding, in your estimation, how long do you think it will take for the mining team of the Yuan Chamber of Commerce to finish mining the Dragon Bloodstone lode? Gu Yi pondered for a moment before asking. Ding Yifun thought for a moment and replied, if everything goes smoothly, it will be over within a month. 1 month. Gu Yi was stunned. He clearly didn't expect it to be so fast. The efficiency of the Yuan Chamber of Commerce was indeed high. Ding Yifun added, even if the mining process isn't smooth, it will definitely not exceed 2 months. Good. Gu Yi nodded with a smile and said, then we will set the Dragon Blood Martial gathering to 2 months later. We will trouble the Yuan Chamber of Commerce to guard the Dragon Bloodstone lode these few days. In a few days, I will transfer the Alchemist Guild's Danwu Imperial Guard over. Danwu Imperial Guard. Ding Yifun was stunned when he heard this name. The name Dan Wu Imperial Guard had always been tied to the Alchemist Guild. The martial artists inside were all guards of the Alchemist Guild. It was rumored that the ordinary guards of the Dan Wu Imperial Guard were all in the giant spirit realm. The captain was in the true energy realm, the commander of the guards was in the spirit wheel realm, and the palace master's strength was even more unfathomable, vaguely on par with Tang Hao and Mo Zhao Jing, the two pinnacle experts. Guti nodded and said solemnly, "As long as the Dan Wu Imperial Guard appears, I'll see who dares to covet the Dragon Bloodstone." Ding Yifun nodded silently and said, "With the Dan Wu Imperial Guard's protection, even the pinnacle experts of first-rate empires wouldn't dare to covet the Dragon Bloodstone. With the Dragon Blood Marshal gathering as a shield and the deterrence of the Dan Wu Imperial Guard, the Dragon Bloodstone load was indeed very safe." At this moment, Ding Yifun took out a flame bullet and pinched it lightly. After an explosion, a ball of scarlet fire shot into the sky and instantly dispersed in the air, extremely dazzling. Nie Tian had seen this kind of flame bullet before. Ding Xiaofeng had used it previously at Tian Luo Mountain. "Everyone wait a moment. My sister will be here soon." Ding Yifun smiled confidently, indicating for everyone not to be anxious. Nie Tian wasn't anxious. He had no choice but to be pestered by Tong Fu, so he taught him a bit of elf language. Tong Fu, this kid's talent in languages was not bad. He actually mastered simple elf language. Nie Tian smiled. "Fu, you can learn from Adele in the future. She can teach you elf language, and you can teach her human language." "All right." Tong Fu chuckled and readily agreed. Adele was a bit bashful, but she also nodded. She knew that Tong Fu had no ill intentions towards her, and she could also feel Tong Fu's passion. "Adele, you've already found the Dragon Bloodstone load for me. I should also fulfill my promise." Nie Tian suddenly thought of something and said, "If you're willing, I can send someone to send you back to your people." Adele's face revealed a trace of fear when she heard Nie Tian's words. She said nervously, "Mr. Nie Tian, I don't want to go back. Can I stay by your side?" Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. He could see that Adele seemed to have something she couldn't say. But since she wasn't willing to say it, Nie Tian didn't ask too much. He only nodded lightly. "As long as you're willing, of course." "Thank you, sir," Adele said with her head lowered, but there was an unconcealable sadness in her eyes. "Mr. Nye, what are you guys talking about?" Tong Fu couldn't help but ask when he saw Adele suddenly reveal sadness. Nie Tian smiled. "Adele is already free now, but she's willing to stay. Are you happy?" "Really?" Tong Fu shouted and chuckled. "Of course I'm happy." Nie Tian smiled speechlessly. A dwarf falling in love with an elf. This world was really strange. A moment later, Aokiki Eureka appeared with the martial practitioners of the Dayuan Chamber of Commerce. These martial practitioners weren't weak. Most of them were at the 9th level of the Wanxiang realm, and a few of them were even at the Giant Soul realm. It was enough to guard this place for now. The news of the Dragon Bloodstone hadn't completely spread yet. There weren't too many martial practitioners who came to Tianluo Mountain. This kind of guard was enough. After making all the arrangements, Niet Tian and the others left. The Dragon Blood Martial meet would begin in 2 months, and the matter of the ancient Dragon Soul was also very urgent. Chapter 233. Heaven Luo City, a secret place. Damn it, the Heaven Luo City actually want to hold the Dragon Blood Martial meet, and even used half of the Heaven Luo Mountain's Dragon Bloodstones as the Martial meet's reward. How cunning. Mo Shi smashed the stone table in front of him with his palm, causing rocks to fly everywhere. His young and tender face revealed a sinister expression. He did not expect that the moment he asked Feng Lianqing to release the news of the Dragon Bloodstone, the news of the Heaven Luo City holding the Dragon Blood Martial meet would actually spread. In this way, his plan to stir up a bloody storm in Heaven Luo City was foiled. Right now, most of the martial artists were thinking about how to participate in the Dragon Blood Martial meet and how to win in the martial meet. Who would think of snatching the Dragon Bloodstone? It had to be said, this move of the Dragon Blood Martial group was indeed brilliant. Putting the originally bloody competition on the surface, even those great powers and sects would definitely be planning to send people to participate in the Dragon Blood Martial gathering, and not how to snatch the dragon bloodstones. Since they could obtain the dragon bloodstone with their own strength, who would bother to fight for it? Master, Heaven Luo City's move is too cunning. Now that everyone was here for the dragon blood martial meet, there was no one who really wanted to snatch the dragon bloodstone. It's almost impossible to cause chaos in Heaven Luo City. Beside Mo, sure, Mr. Z's delicate body was trembling, and her exquisite face was equally gloomy. On the other hand, Feng Lianqing had a calm expression, and the corners of his mouth would curl up from time to time. The Dragon Blood Martial meet was bad news for Mo, Sure, and Mr. Z, but it was not necessarily bad news for the Fengqin Empire. Since the Dragon Blood Martial meet was open to any martial artist below the age of 30, then the martial artists of the Fengqin Empire could also register. The Heaven Luo City's Dragon Blood Martial Meet's publicity board clearly stated that the top 50 of the martial meet will be able to obtain the Dragon Blood Stone as a reward, while the top 100 will be able to obtain other valuable rewards. The Wenqin Empire was not a top power, but it was not difficult to find a martial artist who could fight his way into the top 50 of the martial competition. This way, the Fengqin Empire could also get a small piece of the cake. Of course, Feng Lianqing was very happy. Of course, Aoki Lily had taken into account the various forces of the South Mountain region. Hence, she had decided that the top 50 winners would receive the Dragon Bloodstone as a reward. Nie Tian took out 10% of the Dragon Bloodstones, while the Yuan Chamber of Commerce and Gu Yi each took out 20%. In total, it was half of the Dragon Bloodstones. This reward was indeed generous enough. This would guarantee that the various forces would be able to obtain some Dragon Bloodstones. As for those forces that could not obtain Dragon Bloodstones, they could only blame themselves for being too weak. From this, it could be seen that Aoki Lily's way of doing things was even more meticulous than Ding Yifan's. Mo Sure abruptly stood up. Master, Mr. Purple bowed respectfully in response. Mo Sure laughed coldly and said, "Isn't the Heaven Luo City going to hold the Dragon Blood Martial meet? Then I will turn the Dragon Blood Martial group into a martial group of slaughter." Master, what you mean is... Lady Purple's brows wrinkled slightly, and she was a bit confused. I want you to personally participate in the Dragon Blood Martial meet and kill every opponent you meet. A gloomy look flashed across Mo Ten's immature face as he transmitted his voice to Mr. Purple. Yes. Mr. Z was slightly taken aback, but immediately understood. She could not help but chuckle, revealing a seductive look. Mr. Z's current strength was at the first level of true essence. This strength was not considered strong in the entire Nanshan region, but among the younger generation of martial artists in the Nanshan region, he could at least be ranked in the top 3. Perhaps even a number 1 genius of the Nanshan region's genius list would not be able to easily win against Mr. Z. Moreover, there were still 2 months until the Dragon Blood Martial meet. Mr. Z was confident that she could increase her strength again within these 2 months. At that time, she could be said to have no fear of any opponent in the Dragon Blood Martial meet. As long as she took the lead in killing her opponents, the other martial artists would definitely follow suit. At that time, the Dragon Blood Martial meet would become a martial group of slaughter. Feng Lianqing did not know what Mo Sure and Mr. Z were talking about, but from their expressions, he could infer that it was definitely not something good. Feng Lianqing faintly felt a chill. His gaze swept across Mo Sure and Mr. Z, and his face immediately revealed a deep fear. Feng Lianqing, you said that someone wants to see Z. Is that person here now? Suddenly, Mo Sure thought of something and asked. He's here. Feng Lianqing hurriedly bowed and said, God Transformation Sect's Azure Dragon Home Master CF Feng is already waiting for Mr. Z in Snow-Blowing City. Good. Mo Sure nodded lightly and said, let's return to Snow-Blowing City first and meet this God Transformation Sect's Hall Master. Snow-Blowing City, a border city of the Fengqin Empire, was not far from Tianluo City. A few days ago, Feng Lianqing said that a big shot from the God Transformation Sect wanted to see Mr. Z and asked her to treat him. Originally, Mo Sure and Mr. Z had no interest in this matter, But when Emosher found out that the God Transformation sect was a top force in the Nanshan region, he decided to let Mr. Z meet this God Transformation sect's Hall Master, Xiefeng. In Emosher's view, perhaps the God Transformation sect was a force that dared to offend the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Association. Before he grew up, it would be beneficial to have a good relationship with the God Transformation sect. The three walked out of the secret place, and their figures quickly disappeared. 3 days later, Tianluo City, City Lord Office's martial arena. Everyone in the City Lord office watched from afar. On the martial arena, two figures were fighting fiercely. It was actually Nie Tian and Xiao Shan. Of course, the two were just sparring. Xiao Shan, don't worry and attack. Just don't use your giant spirit true body, Nie Tian shouted with a faint smile when he saw Xiao Shan's hesitation. Nie Tian had just trained hard for 3 days, and his current strength was already at the 3rd tier of the all-creation realm. He had the primal chaos original coffin. 3 days of training was equivalent to a month of closed-door training for other martial artists. Moreover, the 9 extremes war god art that he cultivated was a super heaven-class technique, so his cultivation speed was far faster than ordinary people. In 3 days, Nie Tian's strength had not only increased by 1 tier, but the power of the stars in his body had also awakened to 4,096 stars. However, his mental energy did not increase, remaining at level 43. Nie Tian's greatest improvement wasn't his strength, but his cultivation of a 9 extremes war god art. He had already reached the 2nd tier of the 9 extremes war god art, the extreme with Jade Heaven Realm. The 9 extremes war god art had a total of 9 tiers. Before this, Nie Tian had been stuck at the 1st tier, the extreme gold yellow heaven realm. Just yesterday, his strength had risen to the 3rd tier of the all-creation realm, and the 9 extremes war god art had only reached the 2nd tier, the extreme with Jade Heaven Realm. In his previous life, even at his peak, Nie Tian had only cultivated the 9 extremes war god art to the 5th tier, the extreme Earth Mysterious Heaven Realm. In this life, Nie Tian would definitely cultivate the 9 extremes war god art to the highest 9th tier, the extreme Dark Heaven Realm. As long as he could cultivate to the 9th tier, the extreme Dark Heaven Realm, he would be able to condense the 9 extremes war god armor. With that defensive power, even a peak Heavenly Emperor would not be able to damage it in the slightest. The increase in the tier of the 9 extremes war god art caused Nie Tian's battle prowess to rise greatly. Therefore, he sparred with Xiao Shan to verify his current battle prowess. All right, be careful, mister. Xiao Shan laughed and shouted, Wild World Defying Blade Art, Dark Desert Moon. Chapter 234. At this time, Xiao Shan was already at the Giant Spirit Layer 5, which was a whole realm higher than Nie Tian. Furthermore, he had cultivated the complete world defying wild blade technique. So even if he did not use the giant spirit body, the power of his blade was still extremely terrifying, comparable to an ordinary giant spirit realm level attack. The saber power of the Saber Heart Saber Master is indeed terrifying. In the face of the power of Xiao Shan's blade, Nie Tian sighed in his heart, but did not panic on his face. The 10 Yuan meridians in his body madly revolved, Yuan power surging to the limit. Nie Tian's body lit up with a layer of green light, and one could vaguely see that it was a green armor. This was the Extreme Wood Jade Heaven Battle Armor condensed by the 2nd stage of the 9 Extremes War God Art, the Extreme Wood Jade Heaven Territory. It was much stronger than the 1st stage's Extreme Gold Yellow Heaven Battle Armor. Battle God Heavenly Slash. The instant the Extreme Wood Jade Sky Battle Armor appeared, Nie Tian thrust out his Absolute Heaven Slash. A 10-meter-long sword shadow soared into the sky like a flood dragon breaking out of the abyss. As Nie Tian's strength rose, the astral energy in his body grew even more intense. Hence, the power contained within his astral soul sword chi grew even more terrifying. Such a sharp sword chi. Tong Fu, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but be surprised when he sensed the violent sword aura contained in Nie Tian's sword technique. Because Adele was by Nie Tian's side, Tong Fu also moved to the City Lord's mansion. Gu Yi did not object to this. He was also a little worried about Nie Tian's safety, and with Tong Fu by Nie Tian's side, he would have an additional safeguard. Boss's sword Qi is much more powerful than it was in Blue Cloud City. I estimate that it won't be long before he could develop a sword heart. This increase in strength is 2F** King fast. The Fiend God Blood Codex in Jean de Bao's body could sense the sharpness of the proud sword Qi and astral soul sword Qi, and it couldn't help but speak. Jean de Bao remembered that Nie Tian had condensed his sword Qi in Blue Cloud City, which had been more than a month since then. But now, Nie Tian's sword Qi was abundant and surging. It was obvious that he was going to nurture his sword heart. Nurturing the heart of the sword in a little more than a month, such speed, such talent in sword Dao. If other swordsmen were to find out, those people would definitely have the heart to find a piece of tofu and kill themselves. An ordinary swordsman who could condense sword Qi before the age of 20 and nurture sword heart before the age of 30 would already be considered a decent sword Dao genius. From sword Qi to sword heart, an ordinary swordsman would need dozens of years. A talented swordsman would need 10 years, and a talented swordsman would need several years. However, Nie Tian only used a little more than a month to cultivate the sword heart. This was too monstrous, and it was simply outrageous. Of course, Nie Tian also felt that he was about to cultivate a sword heart, but he didn't expect that he would cultivate a sword heart so quickly. In his previous life, it took Nie Tian 3 years to advance from the sword Qi stage to the sword heart stage. In this life, it seemed that he only needed a little more than a month to nurture the sword heart. Apart from Nie Tian's own comprehension of the sword principle, the chaotic original coffin also played a crucial role in achieving such an abnormal speed. Coupled with the power of the Star Origin Stone, it was understandable that he could achieve such a speed. Boom! At this moment, in the arena, Qiu Shan's Ashen Desert and Nie Tian's War God Heavenly / collided. A terrifying explosion sounded, and soon after, a wave of air surged out. Nie Tian felt the pressure of the rolling wave of air, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Although he was a bit embarrassed, he wasn't injured at all. On the other hand, Qiu Shan was like an old tree, not moving at all. With only this move, the difference in strength between the two was revealed. Qiu Shan had the upper hand in this move, but there was no expression on his face. Instead, he was shocked. He didn't hold back much of his strength in that move. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would be able to take it and come out unscathed. Even the wood blue sky armor on his body wasn't damaged. This kind of strength was too exaggerated. If it wasn't for the fact that he had a certain understanding of Nie Tian, Qiu Shan would definitely think that he had encountered a ghost. One should know that Nie Tian only had the strength of a Wanxiang 3rd tier, while Qiu Shan had the strength of a giant spirit 5th tier. Moreover, Qiu Shan knew that he had cultivated the complete wild world-defying saber art. His current strength was almost twice as powerful as it was several days ago. Even under these circumstances, Nie Tian was still able to withstand his attack. It was really inconceivable. Qiu Shan felt that it was inconceivable. Nie Tian was very dissatisfied with his own strength. He knew that although Qiu Shan didn't hold back in that move just now, he didn't use the giant spirit true body after all. The greatest reliance of a giant spirit realm martial artist was naturally the giant spirit true body. If Qiu Shan used the giant spirit true body, the power of that move, Azure Moon Desert, would at least increase several times. If that was the case, Nie Tian wouldn't be able to withstand it at all. Nie Tian's opponent was Qiu Shan. If it were any other giant spirit martial artist, would they give up the giant spirit true body to fight him? Obviously not. Therefore, Nie Tian still felt that his strength was too weak and that he still had to continue to improve. Again, at this time, Nie Tian laughed and shouted, "Use your more powerful move. I want to see if you can break through my extreme wood blue sky armor." Qiu Shan's move just now didn't break Nie Tian's extreme wood blue sky armor. so Nietian wanted to test the limits of the armor's defense. All right, Qiushan agreed and shouted, Desert Blade has no edge. Blade Mark has no path. The Desert Blade has no edge directly chopped down, and a copious amount of blade energy shot out like an arrow from a bow. Sword 17. Smiling faintly, Nietian's absolute heaven beheader spun in the air, forming a perfect flowing lightsword shield. Bang! The blade energy struck the sword shield, and sparks flew. The sword shield shattered with a bang. The ferocious blade energy bombarded the extreme wood blue sky armor in the next instant. Green light flashed on Nietian's body, and he was immediately pushed back several steps by the shockwave. When Nietian steadied himself, the extreme wood blue sky armor didn't disappear, and he forcefully withstood Qiushan's powerful attack. What a strong defense! Qiushan couldn't help but exclaim when he saw that Nietian was fine. Although Qiushan didn't use his giant spirit true body just now, with his 5th level giant spirit strength and the boost from his saber heart, his all-out attack wasn't any weaker than an ordinary 1st level giant spirit warrior's giant spirit true body. In fact, it was quite a bit stronger. From this, it could be inferred that the seemingly careless green light armor on Nietian's body was enough to withstand a giant spirit attack from a 1st level giant spirit warrior. If Qiushan hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed it. Nietian smiled faintly and patted the dust off his body. He was quite satisfied with the defensive power of the extreme wood blue sky armor. With the extreme wood blue sky armor, even if Nietian couldn't kill a giant spirit realm warrior, he could easily deal with them and not be killed. Moreover, Nietian also had Star Souls as a killing move, so his battle strength was already no weaker than a giant spirit realm warrior. More importantly, after cultivating the 9 War God art to the 2nd level, Nietian's recovery ability had also improved qualitatively. He could even recover his origin energy and blood chi during battle. Let's go, we'll take a look around the city and see how the registration for the Dragon Blood Martial meet is going. At the same time, we'll see how much Gao has collected. Nietian put away the absolute heaven/sword and smiled faintly, preparing to go to Heaven Luo City to take a look. Boss! Jean de Bayo chuckled and came over. His small eyes rolled as he asked, How much did you ask Gao to collect to register for the Dragon Blood Martial meet? Nietian smiled faintly and raised a finger. A piece of low-grade origin crystal. Jean de Bayo was suddenly taken aback and immediately shouted, Boss! You're too black-hearted. De Bayo, you underestimate your boss too much. Nietian shook his head with a smile and said, It's a piece of high-grade origin crystal. Chapter 235. 1 high-grade essence crystal. Jean de Bayo was stunned on the spot and only reacted after a long time. He cried out, F***ck me. Boss, you're simply blackmailing the essence soul. Low-grade essence crystals are Heaven Luo City's entrance fee, brother. Nietian chuckled and ignored Jean de Bayo's astonishment. He had already walked far away. Back then, he proposed to hold the Dragon Blood Martial meeting in Heaven Luo City in order to take advantage of this golden opportunity to earn a huge sum. During the auction previously, it made Nietian realize that although he did not fancy essence crystals, the more the better. Sometimes it could solve many problems. For the Dragon Blood Martial meeting this time, not only did Nietian set the registration fee to 1 high-grade essence crystal, even the entrance fee to Heaven Luo City was low-grade essence crystals. 1 high-grade essence crystal, that was a full 100 low-grade essence crystals, which was 1 million gold coins when converted to gold coins. 10,000 gold coins entrance fee, plus 1 million gold coins registration fee. This was indeed a little ruthless. However, these martial artists who came to Heaven Luo City did not have good intentions in the first place. They all came for the Dragon Bloodstones. If he did not ruthlessly rip them off, Nietian would not be able to live with his conscience. The Dragon Blood Martial meeting had shocked the entire South Mountain region. Currently, there were no less than a few 100,000 martial artists coming and going from Heaven Luo City in a single day. Just these people alone Niet Tion's income in a single day was a few 100,000 low-grade origin crystals. In addition, there were thousands of people signing up every day. Niet Tion was simply counting money until his hands cramped. Earning hundreds of thousands of low-grade essence crystals every day, this number was indeed very terrifying. After a while, Niet Tion and the rest arrived at the Heaven Luo City's Dragon Blood Martial Meeting registration site. The registration site was exceptionally bustling. It was a sea of people, bustling with noise. Holy sh**t. So many people. Jean de Bayo saw countless heads in front of him and thought about how Niet Tion even increased the entrance fee. Immediately, his flat face swelled with excitement. He said in astonishment, "How much is this freaking fee?" Jean de Bayo counted with his fingers for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out anything. Niet Tion smiled faintly and said, "What's there to calculate? Just ask Gao Han, and you'll know." Yes, I have to go and ask." Jean de Bayo came to his senses and chuckled. He shook his huge body and squeezed through the crowd. Niet Tion and the rest followed behind Jean de Bayo. With a big fatty leading the way, they felt much more relaxed. Jean de Bayo spent a tremendous amount of effort to squeeze his way to the registration area. He saw Gao Han smiling from ear to ear as he received the shiny white crystals. Beside Gao Han were boxes and boxes of essence crystals placed, looking extremely tempting. "Commander Gao, how many origin crystals have we collected today?" Jean de Bayo squeezed his way forward and asked impatiently. Gao Han naturally recognized Jean de Bayo. He chuckled and said, "Young Master Jean, the registration fee for today was over 3,000 high-grade origin crystals, and the Brothers of the City Gate received over 300,000 low-grade origin crystals as entrance fee. In total, it's 700,000 low-grade origin crystals." 700,000. Jean de Bayo exaggeratedly opened his mouth wide and could not close it for a long time. Gao Han nodded and smiled, then said, "It's a lot less than yesterday, but it's still not bad." Less than yesterday. Still not bad. Jean de Bayo was completely frozen. Damn, this was the rhythm of being drowned by the origin crystals. At this time, Niet Tion walked over, and Gao Han respectfully bowed. Gao Han now admired Niet Tion to the point of prostrating himself on all fours. The previous city lord, Lan Yunjiang, only knew how to plunder the wealth of the citizens. In the end, the things he plundered were all swallowed by Niet Tion. And Niet Tion? He directly took money from the entire South Mountain region's martial artists. If this trend continued before the Dragon Blood Martial Meeting started, Niet Tion would have earned back all the Dragon Bloodstones he lost. Actually, Niet Tion did not expect the Dragon Blood Martial Meeting to be so popular. It seemed that in the days before the Martial Meeting, there was a need to increase the entrance fee and registration fee. At this time, there was a commotion not far away. "You want to rip me off? Trash like you aren't qualified yet. I, Lei Sanhu, have entered the Sangwa Massacre Grounds and entered the Demon King's ancient tomb. This time, participating in the Dragon Blood Martial Meeting, I must obtain the Dragon Bloodstones. If you want to collect my registration fee, why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Who do you think you are?" A thunderous voice roared crazily, attracting the attention of the surrounding people. "What's going on?" Niet Tion's gaze slightly sunk as he looked at Gao Han. "City Lord, don't panic. I'll go take a look." Gao Han smiled indifferently and shouted, "Everyone move aside. This commander wants to see who dares to cause trouble in Heaven Luo City." The crowd automatically parted, and Gao Han walked over. He saw a burly man with a scar on his face punching a Heaven Luo City guard. The guard screamed in pain and fell to the ground, unable to get up again. "Maniac, you sure have guts. The Dragon Blood Martial Meeting has its own rules. If you want to register, you have to pay the registration fee." Gao Han walked over and shouted, "I'll pay your grandmother." Just as Gao Han finished speaking, Lei Sanhu threw a punch over. Suddenly, a huge phantom of a tiger head appeared in the air, and a tiger's roar resounded. Gao Han reacted quickly and threw a punch over as well. Bang! The two fists collided, but it was like metal colliding with stone. After a muffled sound, Gao Han was immediately sent flying and fell beside Nye Tian's feet. City Lord. Gao Han spat out a mouthful of blood and raised his head to look at Nye Tian. His face couldn't help but turn red. Are you okay? Nye Tian threw a spirit pill to Gao Han and asked. Gao Han swallowed the spirit pill and quickly got up. He lowered his head and said, "This subordinate is fine." The dignified Heaven Luo City Guard commander was sent flying with one punch. It was truly embarrassing. Nye Tian nodded and said, "He is a giant spirit realm martial artist. You are not his opponent." Giant spirit realm martial artist. Gao Han sucked in a breath of cold air and couldn't help but glance at Lei Sanhu. A trace of fear flashed through his eyes. He never thought that this ordinary-looking guy would actually be a giant spirit realm martial artist. Gao Han was only at Wanxiang realm 9th level, so he was naturally not Lei Sanhu's opponent. "You're courting death." At this time, Qiu Shan, who was beside Nye Tian, stepped forward, wanting to personally take action. "Wait." Nye Tian waved his hand to stop Qiu Shan and said with a faint smile, "I will handle this matter." At this time, Qiu Shan and Tong Fu were both present. If either of them were to take action, they would be able to deal with Lei Sanhu. However, Nye Tian was a little interested in this simple-minded guy in front of him. Perhaps he could take him in as a guard in Heaven Luo City. There were too many people in Heaven Luo City now, and the previous guards obviously couldn't handle the situation. Although this Lei Sanhu in front of him was a little silly, his strength wasn't just for show. He was at Giant Spirit Realm 4th level. No wonder he boasted that he would definitely win the Dragon Blood Martial meeting. However, with his strength, he might be able to fight his way into the top 50 of the Martial meeting. If he wanted to become the Martial meetings champion, that would be wishful thinking. Nye Tian walked forward and couldn't help but laugh when he saw this carefree, burly man with a scar on his face. The burly man in front of him was 2 meters tall, and the funniest thing was that he had 3 small braids on his head. It was very comical. Nye Tian chuckled and asked, "You're called Lei Sanhu?" Chapter 236. Lei Sanhu sensed that Nye Tian was only at the 3rd tier of the Wanxiang realm, and he looked amiable, so he didn't take him seriously at all. What kind of threat could a teenage boy pose? Nye Tian shook his head slightly, his expression still amiable. "I'm not a plaything. My name is Nye Tian. I just want to tell you that the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering has its rules. If you want to sign up, you must pay the registration fee. I think that a piece of high-grade origin crystal is nothing to a super expert like you, right?" Qiu Shan, Tong Fu, and the others all frowned in confusion. They didn't know why Nye Tian was so polite to this guy. "I have yuan crystals. Why should I give them to you?" Lei Sanhu became even more arrogant when he saw Nye Tian's amiable expression. He roared, "Kid, you'd better get the hell out of here, or I'll kill you with one slap." "Kill me with one slap?" Nye Tian frowned and smiled, speechless. It had to be said that it was damn hard to reason with people these days. "My fist is bigger, and my words are the most important rule." Lei Sanhu thought Nye Tian was scared when he saw him frown and smile, so he became even more arrogant. He pointed at Gao Han behind Nye Tian and said, "I don't care what rules your Dragon Blood Martial Gathering has. He's an example of not listening to me." "Huh?" Nye Tian couldn't help but laugh. He frowned and said, "I don't think you know who I am. I don't care who you are." Lei Sanhu was obviously angry. He pointed at Nye Tian and roared, "If you don't get the hell out of here, I'll kill you with one punch." Nye Tian couldn't help but let out a long sigh when he saw Lei Sanhu's insolent and irascible appearance. It was too damn difficult to communicate with this guy. It was obvious that this guy was a person with low intelligence who liked to provoke others. Being all brawn and no brains was made for people like Lei Sanhu. Nye Tian thought for a moment, then said, "I am the city lord of Heaven Luo City. The guard you just injured is my subordinate. Since you injured him, you have to pay the price. Tell me, how do you want to compensate me?" "I'll compensate you with a fart." Lei Sanhu let out a furious roar, completely enraged. He threw a punch at Nye Tian, causing a deafening roar to echo through the air. The phantom of the tiger head appeared once again, attacking Nye Tian. wore divine Emperor Fist. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed slightly. He had long since anticipated that Lei Sanhu would make a move. Therefore, instead of dodging, he threw out a punch without any fancy moves. Wherever his fist landed, a golden fist shadow whizzed out. Bang! The tiger head projection collided with the divine war Emperor Fist, causing a burst of flames to erupt. Whoosh! Thud! Boom! Lei Sanhu took 3 steps back before he could stabilize his body after he felt the powerful impact. On the other hand, Nietion didn't move at all. This scene caused everyone present to be petrified. No one had expected that not only would Nietion, who was merely at the 3rd tier of the All Creations realm, be uninjured by Lei Sanhu's punch, but he even had the upper hand. Many people rubbed their eyes furiously to make sure they weren't seeing things. Lei Sanhu was even more shocked. He looked at his own fist in a daze, then pinched his thigh fiercely. Ouch! He finally confirmed that he wasn't dreaming. Let's go again, kid. Lei Sanhu was enraged that he was forced to retreat by a 3rd-tier all-creations martial artist in front of everyone. The muscles on his face trembled as he growled in a low voice. I don't believe I can't beat a kid like you. Lei Sanhu had no idea that he wouldn't be a match for Nietion if he didn't use his Titan true form. Nietion had awakened the power of 4,096 stars in his body. Even without using any martial techniques, he could still exert a force of 1,000,000 Jin. Although Lei Sanhu was at the 4th tier of the Giant Spirit True Body, he was still weaker than Nietion in terms of pure strength without using his Giant Spirit True Body. In that exchange, just now, Nietion had the advantage in terms of strength. Nietion saw that Lei Sanhu's fighting spirit was very strong, but he smiled and said, Lei Sanhu, I don't have time to play with you. If you want to continue fighting with me, you have to agree to a condition of mine. What condition? Speak. Lei Sanhu roared angrily. Now that's the way. Nietion smiled in his heart and said, let's make a bet. 1 move to determine the winner. If I lose, you don't have to pay the Dragonblood Martial Meat registration fee. But if you lose, you'll stay in Heaven Luo City as a guard. How about it? When Nietion's words came out, everyone looked at him with strange gazes. This bet was too ridiculous. If Lei Sanhu won, he would pay less of the Martial Meat registration fee, a piece of high-grade essence crystal. But if Nietion won, he would directly obtain a 4th-tier Giant Spirit bodyguard. Furthermore, it was not even for a long time. That would be a lifetime. The wagers of both parties were worlds apart. If this bet was placed on anyone else, no one would bet on it. But Lei Sanhu was different. This guy was clearly a fool. When Jean de Bayo heard Nietion's words, he could not help but say in his heart, Boss is too much of a bully. You can't play it like this. But Nietion had a calm look. That expression seemed to be saying, Who asked me to crush him with my IQ? Fine, I'll bet with you. Sure enough, Lei Sanhu did not disappoint Nietion. With a roar, he agreed very straightforwardly. Nietion smiled slyly and suddenly said, Lei Sanhu, we have to make things clear first. You're not allowed to use the Giant Spirit Avatar. When Jean de Bayo heard what Nietion said, he was completely stupefied. He cried out in his heart, Boss, you're too much. This is too shameless. Jean de Bayo had just watched the battle between Nietion and Xiao Shan. Without using the Giant Spirit Avatar, even Xiao Shan was unable to defeat Nietion, let alone this fool in front of him. Once Nietion said this, he was basically in an invincible position. Lei Sanhu was not too stupid. He immediately hesitated. When his fist collided with Nietion just now, he already knew that the strength of this little kid in front of him, who was only at the 3rd stage of the all-creation realm, was very strange. Without using the Giant Spirit Avatar, it would be hard to say if Lei Sanhu could win. Seeing that Lei Sanhu was hesitating, Nietion turned around and looked at Jean de Bayo. Jean de Bayo immediately understood what Nietion meant. He curled his lips, then with a look of reluctance, he took a step forward and said in a loud voice, Lei Sanhu, you're at the 4th stage of the Giant Spirit Avatar realm, but Nietion City Lord is only at the 3rd stage of the All-Creation realm. If you use the Giant Spirit Avatar, you're too much of a bully." That's right, that's right. Gao Han, who was at the side, immediately understood. He said loudly, "A fourth stage of the giant spirit avatar, and he still wants to use the giant spirit avatar? Don't tell me he's afraid of Nietian City Lord? What a coward. If he's afraid, then hurry up and pay the registration fee. Don't waste everyone's time." The other guard were not stupid either, and they all chimed in. Mother asterisk Kerr. Lei San, whose face turned red from everyone's words. His muscles began to tremble. He clenched his teeth and roared, "If he doesn't want to use the giant spirit avatar, then don't. I'm a great giant spirit avatar martial artist. Why would I be afraid of a little kid?" His thunderous voice sounded like a joke in Nietian's ears. He couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth as he thought, "Lei San, who? You're definitely going to be my guard." Chapter 237. Lei San, whose roar was like a clap of thunder. More importantly, was a mighty spirit realm cultivator still a mighty spirit realm cultivator without using his mighty spirit true body? The answer was no, at least not in Nietian's eyes. As long as Lei San, who didn't use his mighty spirit true body, Nietian was confident he could defeat him. If Qiushan couldn't break through Nietian's extreme wood blue sky armor without using his mighty spirit true body, then Lei San, who definitely wouldn't stand a chance. In that sense, Nietian was already in an invincible position. "Everyone, get out of the way!" Lei San, who roared, his Yuan meridians operating to the limit. His Yuan energy surged wildly like a broken dam. A faint layer of golden light gradually appeared around Lei Sanhu's body, forming the silhouette of a ferocious tiger that shrouded him. Sensing his powerful aura, the crowd retreated in fear of being injured. Nietian glanced at Lei Sanhu and smiled faintly. "You're actually activating your defense first. You're not that stupid, are you? You want to know if Lei Sanhu's defense was stronger or if his extreme wood blue sky armor was stronger." Qiushan, Tong Fu, and the rest watched Nietian with rapt attention. Although they were confident in Nietian's strength, they couldn't help but feel worried. After all, Lei Sanhu was a fourth-level mighty spirit realm cultivator. Tiger roar, mountains and rivers move. Lei Sanhu might be a simple-minded person, but he was a shrewd fighter. With a roar, he made the first move, clearly trying to seize the initiative. Bang! Lei Sanhu stomped hard on the ground, causing the boulders on the ground to crack and fly into the air. In the next moment, Lei Sanhu's enormous body shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. Roar! At the same time, an earth-shattering tiger roar resounded. The silhouette of a ferocious tiger leaped out and pounced at Nietian. The thunderous aura forced the onlookers to retreat like a strong gale. 9 levels of War God, Scarlet Wind Dragon Slash. In the face of Lei Sanhu's powerful attack, Nietian didn't even frown. The absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand as he raised his arm and stabbed forward. It was a simple and unadorned movement, but there was a heart-palpitating aura that whistled out. Immediately after, the sword Absolute Heaven slash shone brightly, and the enormous sword chi condensed into the phantom of a dragon's head that was several meters long. Roar! The dragon's shadow shook the heavens as it whizzed out. Its enormous aura caused the surrounding crowd to turn pale. Pong! They collided with a loud bang. The dragon and the tiger were fighting, but the superiority was clear. Even though Lei Sanhu's tiger roar was powerful and domineering, it was still not as sharp as the Scarlet Wind Dragon Slash. Roar! The illusory dragon head let out another deafening dragon roar and immediately attacked Lei Sanhu. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as Lei Sanhu was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, he staggered a few steps back and nearly fell to the ground. Woo! Lei Sanhu felt the blood in his chest churn, and he felt incredibly stifled. A mouthful of blood actually gushed out of his throat, but he kept his mouth shut and swallowed it back down with a gulp. A mighty 4th-level spirit warrior had been beaten to the point of vomiting blood by a 3rd-level Wanxiang cultivator. Lei Sanhu couldn't afford to lose face like this. However, Nietian had already noticed Lei Sanhu's little movements. He didn't point out and merely smiled faintly, saying, Lei Sanhu, you've lost. Lei Sanhu had lost. It wasn't until Niet Tian's voice rang out that the crowd finally reacted. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would believe that a third-level Wanxiang cultivator had defeated a fourth-level spirit warrior? Of course, although this fourth-level spirit warrior wasn't all that smart, his strength was the real deal. Even if Lei Sanhu hadn't used his giant spirit true body, the power of his punch, just now, was no small matter. There were also first-level spirit warriors present. They speculated that if Lei Sanhu's punch had landed on their bodies, they probably wouldn't have been able to take it. On the surface, it seemed like Niet Tian was bullying Lei Sanhu by not allowing him to use his giant spirit true body. However, Niet Tian was well aware that he was actually letting Lei Sanhu have his way. Lei Sanhu hadn't used his giant spirit true body, and Niet Tian hadn't used his star soul either. If Niet Tian had used his scarlet dragon soul, just now, Lei Sanhu wouldn't even have been able to stand right now. Bam! Bam! Right at this moment, two figures suddenly appeared without any warning and smashed heavily onto the ground, creating two large pits. Niet Tian was momentarily stunned. When he saw the faces of the two figures clearly, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Holy shit! Jean de Bayo rubbed his eyes when he saw the sudden appearance of the two figures. Then, he broke into a grin. Everyone else had a similar reaction. Their faces were tense, and they wanted to laugh, but didn't dare to. The two of them looked exactly like Lei Sanhu. They were both burly and 2 meters tall. Even the lines of muscles on their faces were identical. The most hilarious thing was that one of them had a large braid on his head, while the other had 2 smaller braids. They complemented each other perfectly with the 3 smaller braids on Lei Sanhu's head. There was no doubt that these 3 big guys were brothers, and triplets at that. Big brother. Second brother. Lei Sanhu cried out dejectedly when he saw the 2 people who had suddenly appeared beside him. Then, he lowered his head deeply. I've lost. It was obvious that the one with 1 braid was Lei Sanhu's big brother, Lei Dahu, and the one with 2 braids was his second brother, Lei Eru. Lei Sanhu was the third brother, so of course he had 3 braids. One had to admit that the parents of the 3 Lei brothers were quite the creative bunch. They could tell the triplets apart by their braids. This way, it was easy to tell the 3 Lei brothers apart. Lei Sanhu's parents were probably speechless. They kept admitting their mistakes, so they came up with this idea. Third brother, you've lost? Lei Eru was stunned. He looked at Niet Tian and asked in astonishment, You've never beaten this kid before? Yes. Lei Sanhu's voice came out of nowhere. He sounded like a wrong child, not daring to raise his head. He probably missed his mother so much that he even felt like crying. This is impossible. All of a sudden, Lei Dahu, who had been silent all this time, let out a furious roar. He stared fixedly at Niet Tian and shouted in a deep voice, You're only at the 3rd level of the manifestation realm. How could you possibly be a match for my third brother? So what if you don't believe it? The truth is right in front of you. You have to believe it. Niet Tian looked at Lei Dahu and smiled faintly. Among the triplets, Lei Dahu was obviously the most normal. He was much more composed than Eru and Sanhu. What surprised Niet Tian even more was that each of the 3 Lei brothers was stronger than the last. Lei Eru was a 5th-tier titan, while Lei Dahu was a 6th-tier titan. They were truly powerful. It seemed that Lei Sanhu's claim of entering the land of blood massacre and passing through the ancient Demon King's tomb was not a bluff. Given the strength of the 3 brothers, it was indeed possible. Niet Tian looked at the 3 brothers in front of him and made up his mind. Chapter 238. The 3 Lei brothers were extremely powerful. If they could all be recruited as guards in Tianluo City, the city's defense would definitely improve. However, Lei Dahu was different from Lei Sanhu. His IQ was much more normal. Coaxing a 3-year-old kid would definitely not work on him. After thinking for a while, Niet Tian said, Lei Sanhu, you have to accept your loss. You don't have to tell us what to do next. Niet Tian could see that the 3 Lei brothers had a deep relationship with each other. If he wanted to recruit Lei Dahu and Lei Eru, he had to think of a way to get Lei Sanhu. Lei Sanhu suddenly raised his head. The muscles on his face twitched a few times. Then, he made up his mind and roared, I'm a man. I'll keep my word. Even if I spit, I'll make a hole. I'm willing to accept my loss and be your guard. With that, Lei Sanhu strode towards Nietian with large strides. Third brother, what's going on? Lei Dahu grabbed Lei Sanhu with a shocked expression. Lei Sanhu was annoyed. He said, Big brother, don't ask. I lost to this kid, so I have to keep my word. At this time, Lei Eru had already asked the people around him about what happened. Then, he whispered into Lei Dahu's ear. Lei Dahu immediately realized what was going on. His gaze towards Nietan became vicious as he roared. Little kid, how dare you lie to my third brother? Sensing Lei Dahu's killing intent, Qiu Shan and Tong Fu became nervous. If Lei Dahu made any moves, they would attack. However, Nietian was not afraid. He smiled and said, There are so many people watching. Lei Sanhu and I had a fair bet. What do you mean by lie? Do you think your third brother is a 3-year-old kid? That gullible? Upon hearing Nietian's words, the crowd burst into laughter. You? Lei Dahu was furious. He couldn't call his brother a fool in front of everyone. Actually, Lei Sanhu wasn't a fool. He was just a little stubborn. Sometimes it was normal. Unfortunately, the person he met was Nietian, who completely crushed him in terms of IQ. Lei Sanhu revealed a truth to the crowd. IQ was a shortcoming. Nietian didn't care about Lei Dahu's anger and indifferently said, This city lord isn't such a petty person. Since you want to go back on your brother's words, I'll fulfill your wish. You can take Lei Sanhu away now. Nietian waved his hand casually, acting as if he didn't care at all. Lei Dahu was surprised at first, but after seeing Nietian's serious expression, he became happy and said, Third brother, let's go. I'm not leaving. However, Lei Sanhu pulled Lei Dahu away and said in a low, muffled voice with a serious expression, Big brother, you're willing to be a villain who goes back on his word, but I'm not. Since I've lost, I have to be the little doll's guard. Sanhuyu. Lei Dahu was completely speechless. To have such a brother, who am I supposed to reason with? Lei Sanhu walked to Nietian's side. Although he was very reluctant, he still stood respectfully. Very good. Sanhu is indeed a man of character. He keeps his word. Nietian slightly nodded his head. He was very satisfied with Lei Sanhu's performance. Of course, sincere praise was also indispensable. Little doll, what exactly do you want? Lei Dahu was so angry that his face turned green. In his heart, he cursed Nietian for being too hateful, completely treating Lei Sanhu like a child and playing with him. However, Lei Dahu wasn't stupid. When he saw Qiu Shan and Tong Fu behind Nietian, his heart immediately sank. Qiu Shan cultivated the dragon whale's 7 breaths technique, so Lei Dahu couldn't see through his strength. Furthermore, Lei Dahu couldn't see through Tong Fu's strength either. He subconsciously thought that the two's strength was above his. If he wanted to use force on Nietian, he definitely wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. Nietian faintly smiled and said, I didn't want to do anything. Didn't you see? I already allowed Lei Sanhu to leave. It was him who didn't want to leave. What could I do? You. Lei Dahu was about to vomit blood from anger because of Nietian. How can there be such a shameless fellow? Seeing that the time was right, Nietian said, Since your third brother has already stayed in Heaven Luo City to be a guard, seeing that you 3 brothers have a deep relationship, I will be kind and let the 2 of you stay as well. The 3 of you brothers will be guards in Heaven Luo City. How about it? Don't even think about it. Right after Nietian finished speaking, Lei Dahu immediately rejected. Lei Sanhu was not stupid. Wasn't Nietian trying to kill 3 birds with 1 stone? Jean de Bayo, who was behind Nietian, also curled his lips and said in his heart, Boss is too shameless. I have to learn more from him in the future. Haha. Lei Dahu, don't be in a hurry to reject. Nietian had long expected that Lei Dahu would not agree. So he smiled and said, Of course I won't let the 3 of you be guards of Heaven Luo City for nothing. How about this? The 3 of you will be guards of Heaven Luo City for 3 months. After 3 months, I am willing to give the 3 of you a drop of dragon blood as compensation, and if the 3 of you don't want to stay in Heaven Luo City, You can leave any time. How about it? A drop of dragon blood. Upon hearing Nietion's words, everyone's eyes turned red as they looked at him. Completely red. Oh my God, a drop of dragon blood. Nietion City Lord is too generous. That's right. That's a drop of dragon blood, not a piece of dragon bloodstone. Nietion City Lord, I am willing to be a guard of Heaven Luo City. Give me a drop of dragon blood. Oh no, give me a piece of dragon bloodstone. I am willing to stay in Heaven Luo City forever as a guard. The surrounding people all went crazy and shouted one after another. A drop of dragon blood. This reward was indeed very high. One must know that the dragon bloodstone itself was a rare treasure, and if one wanted to refine a drop of dragon blood, they would need at least 10 pieces of dragon bloodstones that weighed more than 500 kilograms. Therefore, the value of a drop of dragon blood was definitely not inferior to a 7th-grade medicinal herb. Furthermore, Nietion had casually promised to give each of the 3 lay brothers a drop. That was a whole 3 drops. Oh my God, this reward is enough to move the heart of a true energy stage martial artist. Therefore, when Nietion said he would be kind, he was not trying to coax them, but was sincere. Big brother, why don't we? Laer, who obviously knew the value of a drop of dragon blood. Otherwise, he would not have come to participate in the dragon blood martial meet. His expression stiffened for a moment, and he fiercely swallowed his saliva. He was already tempted. Leda, who was also stunned for a moment, but he suddenly thought of something, and his expression immediately became calm. He looked at Nietion and decisively rejected. No. Nietion was slightly stunned. Leda, who actually rejected such a generous reward, this caught him off guard. City Lord, yeah, he can't do it, but I can. I don't want to drop a dragon blood. I only want a piece of dragon bloodstone. Oh no, I only want half a piece of dragon bloodstone. If that's not possible, a small piece is fine too. The surrounding people shouted madly, and the scene was about to boil over. Of course, Nietion would not care about these people. They were all at the manifestation realm. Even if they were recruited as guards, it would not increase the overall strength of Heaven Luo City by much. It was better not to have them. Chapter 239. Just as Nietion was feeling puzzled, 2 figures in a VIP box in a tea house in the distance had already witnessed everything that had happened. Of the 2 figures, one was a skinny and short old man with a face full of wrinkles. It was as if he was a skeleton wrapped in a skin bag. Moreover, this skeleton was very small, only the height of a 13 or 14-year-old child. However, the old man's eyes were very spirited. They shone brightly and revealed a strange expression. Sitting opposite the old man was a young woman in snow-white clothes. The young woman was spotless, like an orchid in an empty valley. Her eyes were looking into the distance, in the direction where Nietion and the others were. Although they were thousands of meters apart, the woman could see everything clearly. Her eyes were icy blue and seemed to contain an extreme coldness. If one looked at them, they would be able to freeze people. If Nietion was here, he would definitely exclaim, because this young woman was none other than the beautiful dean of Tyrant Cloud Academy, Rui Qinyu. Elderly, are the 3 of them Uncle Lei's sons? Rui Qinyu suddenly asked with a rare hint of joy in her eyes. Yes. The old man, called Oldly, slightly bowed and respectfully said, Saintess, the 3 of them are Lei Fui's orphans. When the sacred palace was destroyed, Lei Fui and the palace lord chose to live and die with the sacred palace, and asked this old servant and the others to leave with the women and children of the sacred palace. I was incompetent. The sacred palace had more than 300 children, but only managed to protect the 3 of them. As Elderly said this, many past events reverberated in his mind. His withered face was soaked with tears. Rui Qinyu looked calm and said indifferently, Elderly, the bloody slaughter palace no longer exists. Don't call me Saintess in the future. Saintess. Elderly's body trembled when he heard this. He immediately knelt down and said sadly, Although the sacred palace no longer exists, Saintess, you are still alive. As long as you are alive, there will always be hope for the sacred palace. Rui Qinyu did not look at Elderly. Instead, She closed her icy blue eyes and sighed softly. Her beautiful face revealed a hint of fatigue. After a short while, Rui Chinyu opened her eyes again with the usual coldness and said, "Get up, elderly. Just call me Miss in the future." "Yes, Saint." Mississippi Oldly replied respectfully. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Miss, Dahu and the others have been cultivating with me since they were young. Although their strength isn't at the peak, they can still hold their own. Moreover, they have entered the land of bloody massacre before. If Miss really wants to enter the ancient bloody massacre tomb, then bring them along." The three of them were worthy of the young lady's complete trust. He will definitely be able to do it at the crucial moment. "No need." Before Elderly could finish, Rui Chinyu interrupted him and said, "Let the three of them stay in Tian Luo City. I know the Heaven Luo City Lord. I'll greet him later." Mississippi Elderly frowned. In the end, he still said, "Miss, the ancient bloody massacre tomb is extremely dangerous. Every time someone enters, less than 1 in 100 can come out safely. Also, those who come out are... This old servant still feels that Miss shouldn't take the risk. You are the last hope of the Saint Palace. Elderly, don't try to persuade me anymore. I've already decided." Rui Qinyu's tone was calm, but it seemed that she was extremely determined. The ancient bloody massacre tomb was an ancient demon king's ruin that only opened once every 5 years. It was rumored that there were countless ancient pill recipes and peerless martial skills in the tomb, as well as many rare medicinal ingredients. However, the ancient bloody massacre tomb was extremely dangerous. Every time it opened, less than 1 in 100 could come out alive. What was even weirder was that every single person who came out of the tomb either became a lunatic or an idiot. It was rumored that there were ancient demon beasts in the ancient bloody massacre tomb. Those who entered the tomb were either swallowed by the demon beasts or scared insane by the demon beasts. "Miss, can you really not wait until the next time the tomb opens?" Elderly understood his family's young Mrs. temperament very well. Although he knew that there was no hope, he still said it. Rui Chinyu shook her head slightly and said, "The next time the tomb opens is 5 years later. I can't wait. With my current body, can I live for another 5 years?" The last sentence, Rui Chinyu only said it in her heart and didn't tell Elderly. Rui Chinyu was currently at the first level of true elemental realm. According to the lifespan of an ordinary martial artist, she could live for 500 years. When a martial artist cultivated, their physique was far superior to ordinary people. Every time their strength increased by 1 realm, they could increase their lifespan by 100 years. However, Raindrop Thousand Leaf had her own difficulties. Her eyes were the rainbow pupils, ranked 7th among the 10 great, innate, anomalous pupils. They were even more terrifying than the purple demon eyes of Great Emperor Polestar of the 9 Emperors of the Heaven Realm. Moreover, Rui Qinyu's 9 colored pupils had already opened. The first pupil was the blue pupil, so her eyes were ice blue in color. Opening the 9 colored pupils not only gave Rui Qinyu stronger combat power, but it also had a side effect, and that was to devour the blood energy in the body. Blood energy was the life, force, and essence of a martial artist. If the blood energy was weak, the martial artist's body would also be weak. Therefore, Rui Qinyu knew that if she didn't find a way to counteract the power of the 9 colored pupil's blood devour, she would not be able to live for another 5 years, or even a year. What was even more fatal was that if she opened the second pupil of the 9 colored pupils, the power of the blood devour would increase exponentially, and then her lifespan would be even shorter. The ancient bloody tomb opened once every 5 years. According to the current situation, Rui Qinyu couldn't wait for another 5 years, so she couldn't miss this opportunity. She had to go. Rui Qinyu was an orphan adopted by the previous dean of Tyrant Cloud Academy. Ever since she was young, she didn't know about her background until Elderly appeared in Lanyan City 5 years ago and found her. Through Elderly, Rui Qinyu found out that she was actually from the 3,000 Small Worlds, the most dangerous place, the Bloody Massacre Grounds, and was the holy maiden of the Bloody Massacre Palace that once ruled the Bloody Massacre Grounds. 20 years ago, the Bloody Massacre Palace was destroyed by a mysterious force. At that time, Rui Qinyu was still a baby and wasn't in the bloody massacre palace, so she escaped. After finding out about her background, Rui Qinyu fell into deep pain. The burden on her shoulders suddenly became heavier, as though there was a mountain pressing down on her chest, and she couldn't breathe at any time. Rui Qinyu's 9-colored pupils had opened 5 years ago, so she had been devouring blood energy for a whole 5 years. The pain of 5 years was something no one could understand. Elderly, go and tell the lay brothers to stay in Tianluo City. I'm going to register for the Dragon Blood Martial Meet, Rui Qinyu said as she slowly stood up and left. This time, the reason why Rui Qinyu appeared in Tianluo City was also for the Dragon Bloodstone. Dragon Blood was a rare treasure. If she could obtain it, not only could it help Rui Qinyu resist the power of the 9-colored pupils, it could also strengthen her martial body. All right, Elderly agreed, then said, Miss, if that little guy called Nietian can really fulfill his promise, I'll let Dehu and the other 2 keep the 3 drops of dragon blood and give them all to you. No need, Rui Qinyu said softly and left. Chapter 240. Heaven Luo City, Dragon Blood Martial Meet Registration Site. Nietian looked at Lei Dahu suspiciously and said with a frown, Have you thought it through? Do you really want to reject my suggestion? In order to recruit the 3 lay brothers, Nietian took out 3 drops of dragon blood. It was simply a huge investment. Who knew that the other party would not appreciate it? It really made him depressed. I've thought it through. No way. Lei Dahu's reply was resolute. There was no room for discussion. All right. Nietian shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Since the other party did not agree, he could not force them. However, he would not let Lei Sanhu go. So he said, Since it's like this, you 2 can leave. Just let your 3rd brother stay. Little kid, you. Lei Dahu's face was flushed red. He could not suppress the anger in his heart. He did not expect that Nietian would still not let him go. Hey, at this time, Tong Fu took a step forward and said, Big guy, don't call him little kid. Even I have to call him Mr. Nya. You keep calling him little kid. Do you think you're more awesome than me? Tong Fu crossed his arms in front of his chest with an arrogant face. He did not put Lei Dahu in his eyes at all. You? Lei Dahu's face became purple, but he knew that Tong Fu's strength was above his, so he did not dare to act rashly. Dahu. At this time, an aged voice sounded and a figure floated over. Master. When Lei Dahu heard this voice, his face immediately became happy. The anger he had just now completely disappeared. He turned around and saw that a skinny old man had appeared beside him. He did not know when, and shouted. The skinny old man that appeared beside Lei Dahu was none other than Elderly. Nietian looked at the skinny old man in front of him. He was quite surprised in his heart. The old man before him was short and skinny, not much taller than Tong Fu. Furthermore, there was not the slightest trace of origin energy emanating from his body, making him seem like an ordinary person. However, Nietian was able to perceive that this old man's strength was absolutely extremely shocking. He was actually able to appear without anyone noticing. His strength was absolutely not beneath that of the Gong family's old monster, Gonglingi, from that day. It was even possible that he was even more terrifying than the Mo family's elder, Mo Foam. What made Nietian even more surprised was that Lei Dahu actually called this old man master. It turned out that the braids on the heads of the 3 lay brothers were not the work of their weird parents, but the work of their weird master. Nietian didn't expect the 3 lay brothers to have such a powerful master. It seemed like he had poked a hornet's nest this time. Qiu Shan and Tong Fu also gasped. Although they didn't know Elderly's strength, he was Lei Dahu's master, so how could he be weak? Both of them tensed up. Master, this child is deceiving 3rd brother. He wants to use a high-grade spirit stone to make 3rd brother his guard. Lei Dahu saw that reinforcements had arrived and hastily said, I already know about the matter. Elderly waved his hand, but he smiled kindly at Nietian and said, Nietian City Lord's methods are good. A small bet was enough to trick my disciple into running around in circles. This is truly an eye-opener for Master, this child didn't trick me. I willingly made the bet with him. Before Nyetian could say anything, Lei Sanhu had already defended himself with a face full of confidence. His expression seemed to be saying, "I'm so smart. How could this kid trick me?" Nyetian couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. He could tell that this old man was not easy to deal with, so he faintly smiled and said, "Old Mister's words are too serious. The bet between me and Lei Sanhu was fair and just, without the slightest bit of falsehood. Everyone here can see that I really did defeat him." That's right, that's right. Nyetian City Lord really did defeat the big guy. "Old man, don't pester him endlessly." Nyetian's words won the agreement of those around him. These people simply didn't see how powerful Elder Li was, so they followed along. If they knew Elder Li's true strength, they wouldn't even dare to let out a fart. Elder Li faintly smiled and said, "I only praise Nyetian City Lord's methods, but Nyetian City Lord is in such a hurry to explain himself. Isn't it because he has a guilty conscience?" Elder Li clearly saw the battle between Nyetian and Lei Sanhu. He also found it very strange that Nyetian was able to repel Lei Sanhu with a single sword strike. Lei Sanhu was his disciple, so he knew very well how strong he was. Even if he didn't use his giant spirit true body, he could still easily deal with a first-level giant spirit martial artist. Therefore, there was only one explanation. Nyetian had the strength of a giant spirit martial artist. A third-level Wanxiang martial artist actually had the battle strength of a giant spirit martial artist. It was truly unimaginable. Am I guilty? Nyetian was stunned for a moment before he shrugged and said, "All right." Elder Li didn't care about Nyetian and directly said, "We're all smart people, so let's not talk nonsense. I is very satisfied with Nyetian City Lord's conditions. I'm willing to let Dahu and the other two stay in Heaven Luo City as guards, but only for 3 months. After 3 months, I hope Nyetian City Lord can keep his promise and give us 3 drops of dragon blood as compensation." Nyetian was stunned. He didn't think this old man would actually agree to let Lei Dahu and the other two stay in Heaven Luo City as guards. This really was too sudden. He almost couldn't react. "Of course." Nyetian faintly smiled and said, Nyetian will definitely do what I say." Although the 3 drops of dragon blood were precious, it wasn't difficult for Nyetian. He had 10% of the dragon bloodstone mine, and the mine was very rich. 10% of the dragon bloodstone was enough to refine 100 drops of dragon blood. Therefore, Nyetian didn't care about the 3 drops of dragon blood. "Very good." Elder Li slightly nodded and turned to Lei Dahu and the others. You 3 stay in Heaven Luo City. I will come find you in 3 months." The reason why Nyetian suggested letting Lei Dahu and the other 2 be guards for 3 months was because he calculated that the dragon blood martial meet would basically be over after 3 months. "All right." Lei Dahu's face was full of excitement as he nodded heavily. In fact, Lei Dahu was also very tempted by the 3 drops of dragon blood. He didn't dare to agree to Nyetian's request before because he was afraid his master, Elder Li, wouldn't agree. Now that Elder Li had personally agreed, he naturally didn't have any misgivings. "Thank you, Master." Lei Eru and Lei Sanhu shouted at the same time, the braids on their heads spinning excitedly. Lei Sanhu was especially happy. He was just worried that his master would scold him, but now that Elder Li had personally agreed, he was the happiest. Elder Li secretly observed Nyetian and said in his heart, "Since the Holy Maiden trusts this kid so much, there shouldn't be a problem handing Dahu and the others over to him." Nyetian City Lord. At this moment, Elder Li seemed to suddenly think of something and said, "Do you have time later? My young miss wants to see you." "Your young miss?" Nyetian was slightly stunned and said, "Do I know her?" Elder Li's strength was already unfathomable, so the person he called young miss must have an extraordinary status. Nyetian didn't remember knowing such a powerful person. "It's me who wants to see you." Just as Nyetian finished speaking, a cold voice sounded. Nyetian raised his head, and a familiar figure entered his field of vision, causing his face to stiffen. Chapter 241. "It's you." Nietian didn't think that Rui Qinyu would suddenly appear in Tianluo City. He couldn't hide the surprise on his face. What surprised Nietian even more was that elderly actually called Rui Qinyu Miss. Judging from his respectful attitude towards Rui Qinyu, it was obvious that she was a servant. Nietian only knew that Rui Qinyu was the dean of Tyrant Cloud and had a demonic talent. He didn't expect her to have such a high status. Mississippi, elderly bowed respectfully when he saw Rui Qinyu suddenly appear. "Master, who is she?" Lei Dahu asked in surprise when he saw Elder Li's actions. It was obvious that Lei Dahu and his brothers didn't know about Rui Qinyu's existence. Elder Li didn't answer Lei Dahu, but signaled him not to speak. Rui Qinyu glanced at Nietian with her icy blue eyes and said, "Nietian, City Lord, I want to talk to you. Is it convenient?" Nietian was taken aback for a moment before he smiled and said, "Of course. Teacher Ryu still owes me 10 days of cultivation time. Let's go." Rui Qinyu said and walked away. Nietian said goodbye to Qiushan and the others and left with Rui Qinyu. After a while, the two of them arrived at the private room in the tea house that Rui Qinyu had stayed in before. "Teacher Ruoyu, what do you want to say to me?" For the first time, Nietian was nervous in front of others. He took a deep breath and asked. For some reason, Nietian felt that Rui Qinyu was like a block of ice that wouldn't melt for 10,000 years. The colder it was, the more he was attracted to it. Seeing Rui Qinyu again, Nietian felt that the coldness around her was even more intense. It was as if she would keep people thousands of miles away from her at all times. "Don't call me teacher. I've already left Tyrant Cloud Academy." Rui Qinyu looked in the direction where Nietian was, but her eyes did not linger on him. "You left Tyrant Cloud Academy? Why?" Nietian was stunned. "There is no why. This is my business. You don't need to know," Rui Qinyu replied coldly. "Fine." Nietian couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. "Tell me why you are looking for me." Nietian didn't know why Rui Qinyu left Tyrant Cloud Academy, but he could feel that she had a lot on her mind. Even someone as cold as Rui Qinyu felt exhausted. Rui Qinyu paused. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, but she still said, "The 3 Lei brothers are my friends. I hope you could take care of them for me. Don't let them get hurt." "Take care of them?" Nietian was slightly stunned. He smiled and said, "Teacher Ruoyu, what are you talking about? I'm only at the manifestation realm, but the 3 Lei brothers are all Titan realm experts. They also have a powerful master with them. They don't need me to take care of them. I think you should ask them to take care of me." Rui Qinyu frowned slightly. She seemed to dislike Nietian's joking attitude. She said Rui coldly, "I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about the future. If they encounter a powerful enemy, I hope you can protect them." "The future?" Nietian noticed that there was something wrong with Rui Qinyu's tone. It was as if she was making arrangements. He couldn't help but frown and asked, "Where are you going?" "That's none of your business," Rui Qinyu answered bluntly. Her tone was still cold. Nietian was smart. He immediately noticed that Rui Qinyu was hiding something from him. He said, "Of course it's none of my business where you go, but you still owe me 10 days of cultivation time. I want you to pay it back now. I've said it before. I'm no longer Dean Tyrant Cloud." Rui Qinyu refused flatly. Nietian smiled again and said, "When we made the agreement, you were still Dean Tyrant Cloud. So the agreement is still valid. You're being unreasonable." Rui Qinyu didn't want to talk nonsense with Nietian. She frowned slightly, and the coldness on her face became even more intense. Nietian's sharp eyes swept across Rui Qinyu's body inch by inch. Suddenly, he noticed that there was a red token on the latter's waist. Soon after, the corner of his mouth curled up weirdly. He said, "Since you said that I'm being unreasonable, then I'll show you." As Nietian spoke, he suddenly walked forward and hugged onto Rui Qinyu's slim waist. "You!" Rui Qinyu obviously didn't expect Nietian to do such a thing. Her face immediately turned deep red, and she screamed. However, in the next moment, Nietian let go of her and kept a distance from her. He laughed mischievously and said, "Teacher Ryu, I'll do as you said just now. As long as the 3 Lei brothers are in Tianluo City, I'll guarantee their safety. However, I'm still very interested in where you're going next. Do I have to tell you just because you're interested? Rui Chinyu was extremely embarrassed and angry. She scolded coldly. At the same time, she kept her guard up against Nie Tian. If it wasn't for the fact that she knew about Nie Tian, just based on his rude behavior just now, she would have died 100 times already. It doesn't matter whether you tell me or not. Nie Tian smiled faintly. Soon after, he took off the red token from Rui Chinyu's waist and kept it. He said in his heart, "Anyway, I'll find out where you're going. All right, you can leave now." Rui Chinyu took a glance at Nie Tian. Because she was too nervous just now, she didn't notice Nie Tian's little action. Furthermore, she seemed to be a bit afraid that Nie Tian would do something improper again, so she gave a cold order to chase him away. "All right." Nie Tian smiled and nodded. He waved his hand and said, "Teacher Ryu, we'll meet again." After that, Nie Tian pushed open the door and left. "Bastard. See you again." Rui Chinyu felt that Nie Tian's aura had already disappeared. Her pretty face suddenly flushed, and she said fiercely. At this moment, the door opened with a squeak. Elder Li's figure appeared. Seeing that Rui Chinyu's expression wasn't right, he couldn't help but ask, "Miss, are you all right?" Rui Chinyu immediately recovered her usual coldness and said faintly, "I'm fine." Elderly frowned slightly. Although he was confused, he didn't dare to ask too much. He said, "Miss, who exactly is that kid called Nie Tian? Why is his strength so strange? I see that although he only has the strength of the 3rd tier of the Wanxiang realm, his true combat strength is definitely not weaker than an ordinary 1st tier of the giant spirit realm. Moreover, the martial technique he used in the wager with San, who is very unusual. It was at least a heaven tier martial technique. Could he be someone from the 4 great clans? I don't know either." Rui Chinyu shook her head and said, "He is the new newcomer king of Tyrant Cloud Academy. When I went back to Blue Cloud City last time, I heard many rumors about him. As for his true identity, I really don't know." Mississippi. When Elderly heard Rui Chinyu say this, he couldn't help but become cautious. He said, "Do you want this old servant to investigate his identity?" "No need." Rui Chinyu almost blurted out. She immediately realized that she had lost her composure and said, "Although I don't know who he is, I can feel that he is not our enemy." "Feel?" Elderly was stunned. He was astonished. Since when did Miss believe in feelings? Elderly was puzzled, but he didn't think too much about it and didn't continue asking. Chapter 242. What the hell is this token? After leaving the tea house, Nie Tian walked on the streets of Heaven Luo City. He held the command token that Raindrop Chinya had gifted him in his hand. He flipped it over a few times, but he was actually unable to figure out anything about it. The token was crimson, and there was a faint smell of blood flowing inside. But what was strange was that there was not a word on the token, and he couldn't see any other information. A little interesting. As Nie Tian looked at it, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. He immediately smiled and said, "Let old man Gu take a look. That guy has lived for hundreds of years. He should be able to see something." Thinking so, Nie Tian walked towards Danwu City. After a while, Nie Tian appeared in Danwu City's Alchemist Guild. "Mr. Nie Tian, why are you here?" Before he entered, a familiar voice sounded at the door, very enthusiastic and excited. Nie Tian looked up and saw that it was the beautiful waitress who served him last time. She seemed to be called Lu Yingying. "Miss Yingying." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "I have something to ask old man Gu. Is he here?" Yes. Lu Yingying didn't expect Nie Tian to actually remember her name. She was so excited that her pretty face blushed, and she said, "Mr. Nie, please come with me. Master Gu is in the inner hall." Under Lu Yingying's lead, Nie Tian quickly walked into the Alchemist Guild hall. After just a few steps, he bumped into a familiar person, Shui Linglong. Nie Tian. Shui Linglong saw Nie Tian and shouted exaggeratedly. She immediately walked over and said with a smile, "What are you doing here?" Nie Tian noticed that Shui Linglong was looking at him strangely. He immediately smiled and said, "Little girl, the Alchemist Guild isn't opened by your family. You don't allow me to come?" How is that possible? Of course I allow you to come, and I welcome you to come. Shui Linglong mischievously smiled. Immediately after, she paused for a moment and said, "But you still have to pay the entrance fee." Entry fee? Nie Tian went into a blank. He still didn't know when the Alchemist Guild had to pay the entry fee. Shui Linglong's small face tensed up, and she seriously said, "This princess has to pay an entrance fee to enter your Heaven Luo city. So naturally, you have to pay an entrance fee to enter the Alchemist Guild." Nie Tian didn't know what to say, but he soon realized that this young girl was jealous of him because he had collected the city fees. Nie Tian didn't mind and said, "Little girl, tell me, how much should I pay as an entrance fee? Are you really going to hand it over?" Shui Linglong was just fooling around. She did not expect that Nie Tian would really hand it over. Soon after, she smiled complacently and muttered, "Let this princess think about it." Nie Tian shook his head with a smile and casually said, "Don't talk about it. This mayor will hand over a permanent entrance fee, just 10,000 low-grade crystals. Later, you can ask for it from Fatty." After speaking, Nie Tian no longer cared about Shui Linglong and signaled Lu Yingying to quickly lead the way. He didn't have time to play around with Shui Linglong. He still had to find Gu Yi and ask about the command token. 10,000 low-grade crystals. Shui Linglong's small mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed inside. She couldn't react for a long time. Lu Yingying was also stiff for a long time. She looked at Nie Tian with a surprised expression. She had been a waitress in the Alchemist Guild for 2 years and had seen many rich people who squandered money like it was dirt. But it was the first time she had seen someone who squandered money like Nie Tian. Paying 10,000 low-grade essence crystals as an entry fee. Did he think essence crystals were dog shit? Nie Tian saw Lu Yingying standing there in a daze. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Miss Yingying, those who see it have a share. How about this? Later, you and Princess Linglong will also go find Fatty and ask for 10,000 low-grade crystals." "Really?" Lu Yingying cried out in surprise. Suddenly, as if she was electrocuted, she jumped up in excitement. Nie Tian looked at the two silly girls from the side. He couldn't help but curl his lips and mumbled, "Isn't it just a few crystals? Is there a need to be so excited?" Nie Tian shook his head and decided to look for Gu Yi himself. "Nie Tian, are you here to look for teacher?" At this time, Shui Linglong suddenly reacted and ran 2 steps to catch up with Nie Tian. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded while walking. Shui Linglong giggled. It was obvious that she was still immersed in the excitement and said, "Why are you looking for teacher? Ask about something?" Nie Tian said. Shui Linglong suddenly jumped to Nie Tian's side and said with a serious face, "You don't need to look for teacher, just ask me. I know everything that teacher knows, and I also know things that teacher doesn't know. Moreover, this princess can give you a discount. Ask a question for 10,000 low-grade crystals, how about it?" Nie Tian's face darkened. This girl must have gone crazy thinking about money. Nie Tian thought for a moment and suddenly said, "Little girl, do you still know what your surname is?" "My surname is Shui." Shui Linglong blurted out without thinking. Nie Tian laughed and said, "If you know that your surname is Shui, why would I dare to ask you?" After speaking, Nie Tian walked past Shui Linglong and walked towards the guild's inner hall. "What do you mean?" Shui Linglong was stunned and didn't react for a long time. At this time, Lu Yingying walked over and cautiously said, "Princess, did Mr. Nie Tian say that you are very weak?" Shui Linglong understood and heavily nodded her head. Shortly after, she reacted and stamped her feet. "Good, Nie Tian. You actually dare to say that this princess is weak. Do you not want to live anymore?" Unfortunately, Nie Tian had already walked far away at this time. Arriving at the inner hall, Nie Tian didn't even knock and directly pushed the door open. Gu Yi just happened to be studying a few ancient pill recipes in the room, but there were a few parts that he couldn't understand and was very distressed. "Brother Nie, you came at the right time. Come help your old brother take a look at these pill recipes. Why can't I refine pills? Is there a mistake somewhere?" Seeing that Nie Tian had come, Gu Yi was startled at first, but soon after he rolled his eyes and handed over the pill recipes. Nyetian took the pill recipes and faintly smiled in his heart. This old fox, he wants to test my attainments in the Tao of alchemy. All right, I'll let you be amazed. Nyetian glanced at the pill recipes, thought for a moment, and said, there are no problems with these pill recipes, but they all contain the same kind of medicinal ingredient, fire cloud flower. And then, Guti saw that Nyetian only glanced at the pill recipes and directly asked. He couldn't help but frown. Nyetian continued, it is precisely because they all contain fire cloud flower that you can't refine pills with these pill recipes. Why? Guti was interested. These are all ancient pill recipes. The medicinal ingredients recorded are determined by the medicinal properties of the fire cloud flower at that time. But the fire cloud flower is a kind of medicinal ingredient with strong adaptability. After tens of thousands of years of evolution, the medicinal properties have long changed. So if you still follow the dosage in the pill recipes to refine pills, of course it won't work. Nyetian returned the pill recipes to Gu-I and said, for each pill recipe, double the dosage of the fire cloud flower and guarantee that you will succeed in refining pills. As expected, Brother Nye is truly a godly person. Gu-I was immediately enlightened. Previously, when he was concocting pills, he had already sensed that the dosage of the fire cloud flower was insufficient, but he did not dare to casually adjust it, fearing that the pill would explode. Now, after hearing what Nyetian said, he was suddenly enlightened. I can't be said to be a godly person. I'm just a little awesome. That's all. Nyetian casually smiled, then took out a token, passed it to Gu-I, and said, Elder Gu, you are experienced and knowledgeable. Help me take a look. What kind of token is this? This is... When Gu-I saw the scarlet token in Nyetian's hand, his expression suddenly changed, and his entire person froze.